All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Council Transportation meeting of September 3rd, 2024. The meeting started at 6:30 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting allowing public comment both in person and virtually. Instructions for addressing the committee virtually may be found on the posted agenda. We'll move on to item 2, which is roll call. The Public Works Director will take attendance by roll call.
Thank you. Member Matacek?
Here.
Member Hicks?
Here.
Chairperson Kane?
Here.
Everybody's here.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to item 3, which is oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public on the line or in person like to provide comment on non-agenda items? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or approach the lectern. We'll take in-person speakers first, and staff will display the timer on the screen before we start, just so we can.
Hi, Cliff Chambers.
Just one moment. All right, we'll just do the timer. Great.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Cliff Chambers, resident of Mountain View. I took the community shuttle here. I often try to take the community shuttle as often as I can. I can no longer drive at night. So getting to this meeting is great. If being able to get home after we passed the last revenue measure, which was measure P. There were some improvements, particularly in the morning for the community shuttle, but I was hoping by this time we could have some at least a few days a week so that you could not only come to meetings like this and get back home, but also come to downtown for dinner and get back home, maybe enjoy a glass or two of wine and not drive. So I'd like to see that revisited at some point. Thank you very much.
All right, are there any virtual public speakers?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so we'll close public comment. We'll move on to item 4, minutes approval. Item 4.1 is approved meeting minutes for the January 4th, 2024 meeting. Would any member of the public joining us virtually or in person like to provide comment on the minutes? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or approach the lectern. We'll take in-person speakers first. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. I'm not seeing any public comment on the minutes approval. Do we have any virtual public comment on the minutes?
I don't see any hands raised.
Great, thank you. All right, so we'll move this back to the committee for deliberation and action. Are there any corrections or comments on the minutes? All right, I'll entertain a motion. Member Matchett.
I move that we approve the CTC's minutes from June 4th, 2024, as prepared.
Great, so we have a motion by Committee Member Matchett, seconded by Committee Member Hicks. So we'll just do a raised hand vote. Great, that is unanimous. We'll move on to item 5, new business. Item 5.1 is our active transportation plan, project 21-36. The staff presentation will be provided by Don Cameron, Public Works Director. Ms. Cameron.
Good evening. So this will be my last official presentation as Public Works Director, and appreciate the opportunity tonight to do so.
Can we vote on that?
Sorry, it's not on the agenda.
Oh, how come that's not showing?
But also just given the nature of this particular study and project and how very vitally important it is to the city, I appreciate having the ability to talk to you directly about it and how it's going to proceed. So I want to start out by saying that as staff, we really appreciated the council's thoughtful deliberations and comments about the active transportation plan when we brought it forward to you in May to talk about scoring criteria, but council sat back and said, wait a minute, we need more information. We'd like to see a little a different approach taken. And that was very valuable to staff. And we took the time over the summer to really look at the remaining steps involved with the active transportation plan, a good approach for it, maybe where some scope enhancements would be beneficial, which is what's led us to coming forward with you tonight with the recommendations that you're going to see here that we want to discuss with you. The other piece that we've all talked about and realized was we really appreciate that the council referred it back to the Council Transportation Committee because we realized that we had not taken advantage of what a valuable resource this committee is. We've been visiting this committee for various major projects and plans in other areas, giving us really good feedback, really kind of helping us steer the course until we are ready to go to council. And this was a project where we did not take advantage of coming to the Council Transportation Committee. And that is something you'll hear towards the end that we want to rectify going forward because it is, when I started with the city and then as public works director, the Council Transportation Committee met maybe once every 2 years and only dealt with neighborhood traffic management program requests and things like that. And we've really, over the last 2 to 3 years, expanded the breadth and what we bring to the committee, and it has been incredibly helpful. So with laying that groundwork, tonight, we're gonna revisit a little bit with you the vision statement because we've not had a total airing of the vision statement yet with council members, as well as talk about some approach and scope revisions based upon the feedback we received from the city council. We can move on. So this is what you see up here and has been laid out in your memo was the planned progression of scope elements from when the project was first approved by council to move forward in 2022, which was to start with existing conditions. And as you see here, that's complete. Move on to a discussion about vision statement, which is in a draft form. And then the thinking was go into guiding principles and scoring criteria, more towards thinking that this would allow an objective review of scoring criteria. At the same time, not all of this stuff is happening one by one. A lot of things are happening in parallel. Policy development, we know a lot of policy work, it has been recommended and needed. But then once that's set in place, putting together the holistic network concept with the balancing the different modal priorities along with the prioritized project list. And as we're showing at the bottom, community and community engagement all through the way. And again, as we heard from council, and it makes a lot of sense, a desire to kind of do these in a slightly different order, which I'll talk about a little further. But before we jump it all into that, I also wanted to spend some time talking about what has been accomplished since the plan kicked off, what we've been focusing on, that laid the groundwork for where we're at, because we acknowledge that we really kicked off and got started in fall of 2022. So it's been nearly 2 years, and there are questions about why is it taking so long? What have we accomplished? So we want to talk a little bit more about that also. Next slide. So one of the key pieces of what we've been doing is, honestly, I've been involved in my career in many, many long-range plans, transportation plans, countywide plans. And many of them have had really good, robust community engagement. I was reminded recently, I won't tell you how many decades ago, that I was involved in the first project that ever did a telephone survey about transportation, and met and going all over the county for community meetings. So I've been a big believer in this. But having done that, the community and committee engagement process that was set up for this plan goes far beyond anything I've ever seen before, really striving to reach every member of our community, special emphasis on our vulnerable communities. That was very impressive. I was just reading up a little bit more. And so what you see here is, as noted, the community outreach tools were emails, social media posts, lawn signs, posters, palm cards, but also a lot of direct engagement and meetings. So in addition to always using our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which has actually discussed and heard elements or pieces of the active transportation plan that's being developed 5 times so far. It's on nearly every other meeting agenda that they have. An in-house technical advisory committee was set up involving multiple departments. We also have the Active Transportation Plan Advisory Committee, which actually includes 12 representatives of community-based organizations and regional bodies. So these are a lot of different groups meeting, we're going to with information, but there also was the citywide survey, which received over 650 responses and an interactive map where the community, I remember looking at the map as it was underway, where community members were actually showing us on a map their areas of concern, whether they were bicycling or walking. But then there were the bike tours, the walking tours. At least one of these walking tours was done in Spanish, as I recall. There was, again, in really wanting to make sure we heard from our most vulnerable community members. There was a meeting with the Day Workers Center,
Community Services Agency.
Community Services Agency. When we found that through this survey and the other work, we still weren't hearing from more of a demographic representation of what the city looks like, and some areas were still unrepresented. We did more reach out in order to make sure things were in multilingual, all of that. That takes time. Full year was spent on this, but the information gained was incredibly valuable. And then next slide. At the same time, existing conditions analysis was underway. Again, as mentioning, these things aren't done in absolute sequence. Things are done in parallel. And in fact, a lot of that community engagement fed into the existing conditions analysis, as well as the technical work. And as the condition analysis was being developed and a report was produced, it was then presented back again to the Technical Advisory Committee, the Active Transportation Plan Advisory Committee, the BPAC, and that was last October. So that's pretty much where the first year was spent on the project. Since that time, that's more work started to be done in terms of starting to look at policy development and then the scoring criteria work that was brought to council. So next slide. Oh, I forgot, this slide also included just a brief summary of some of the key things we heard from the community and came out of the existing conditions. Again, identifying really a need for more bike and ped-friendly city policies. And I think we're also going to be listing some potential code ordinance changes that we would suggest looking into, those types of things. The desire to support mobile homes and multifamily housing, really making sure we're looking at all needs of our whole community, including those needing to use wheelchairs, pedestrian-friendly signal operations, and of course, really moving towards more complete and green streets, because they really do improve the pedestrian environment and really promote active transportation and a real focus on schools. So I'm sure you're familiar with all this. And of course, things like delivery bots started to come up, and how do we integrate that into our transportation system? And a big issue we are hearing more about is delivery trucks and so on, parking in bike lanes. And how do we do that? There's limited curb space, and there's a lot of demand for the curb space. And how do you manage your curb space? All right. So here's where we're at, is we did work with the advisory committees, the community, developed some scoring criteria and guiding principles, and brought that forward to the council in May. And as I mentioned very early on, did receive some really good feedback. And one of the ones was the desire to review the holistic network with modal priorities to have a better picture of what the vision is and what the full system could look like. before starting to talk about scoring criteria, before trying to prioritize corridors or projects, that type of thing. And council then referred to the Council Transportation Committee, let's please work with staff, holistic network understanding the vision. And then could look at revised criteria as needed, and that would be kind of a next step with the weights and scoring metrics. Council also indicated desire to ensure that we're doing enough to look at the potential feasibility of what may be proposed. And we know from like the original bicycle transportation plan that was adopted in 2015, we go back and look at it and realize that as we tried to implement some of those, it turned out that they weren't as easy to do as we thought they would be. We ran into some feasibility problems and we had to make some design decisions, and they turned out to be a lot more expensive than we thought, because there's a lot of competing interests out there in the right of way, not the underground utilities, what it costs to move curbs, all of those pieces, some things you don't expect to run into until you get into design of a project. So we understand that, and we'll talk a little bit too about how we do want to enhance the feasibility analysis, but keeping in mind that this is more of a planning document. It's not something that everything's gonna be delivered in the next 2 years. This will lay out a network that will take 10 more years to develop. It has to be that type of thing. So, next slide. And before we then now jump into the changes of approach and the feasibility analysis, we want to step back. So one of the things also, when we came to council in May, the vision statement that was developed and worked with, and all the committees had input into it and then generally supported this as the vision statement, was more brought to council in May as a, here it is, information, but there was no actual request for council to say, do you concur? Would you like to see it changed? Are you supportive? And frankly, vision statements form the foundation on the basis of which these types of plans are done. And this is why you always see a precise plan, vision statement, all of those things. So we're like, oh, we need to take a step back. So one of the things on your agenda tonight is looking at the vision statement. And again, a lot of outreach was done. But when we go back to council, we need council to say, yes, we agree with it, or we would like to see changes to it. And we thought the first step is for this committee to look at it. Let us know what you think about it. Would you like any reworking or thoughts to it before we bring it to council? So that's on your agenda tonight, and we can definitely pop back up the vision statement when you're ready to look at it. Yes, it looks longish, but when you break it down, it's a pretty, it really covers the key things that we really want out of our active transportation network. So, again, we can put this back up when you're ready to talk about the vision statement. Next steps. So let's talk about the revised approach. So again, you'll recall that we had policy development to get started, and then the next step was the guiding principles and scoring criteria. And then it was going to be, and then the next step was going to be the holistic network blended with prioritized project list, develop that and apply the scoring criteria, come with your priority list, and then go out and do another big round of community outreach, which takes several months to get through, and have them all react at the same time to the holistic network and the prioritized project list based upon the scoring criteria. However, I will say also in my experience, it's not unusual and somewhat typical that first you do develop your network, what your vision is of what your in final build out when you get there. What is it you want to see, in terms of your bicycle types of bicycles, facilities, where and how you're going to meet pedestrian needs. Where is there the opportunity for enhancing or prioritizing bicycles on a particular road, but maybe parallel to it, we really want to focus more on enhancing the limited right of way for pedestrians. every street should meet all modes. It's just the level to which the type of infrastructure that's in place can vary from road to road, because again, we're dealing with constrained right of way, and we want to make sure we are serving all modes throughout our system. So basically what we're recommending is we do a little switching around, and you kind of see 4 and 5 where we say, okay, let's just switch gears. Let's start focusing now on the holistic network with modal priorities. And once that is developed, and go through a full round of community engagement on this. And as after that's developed, we can bring that back and to this committee, to the council, and then come back to, do we want to refine or revise the scoring criteria based upon what we're seeing, and apply that to the prioritized, kind of to help prioritize corridors and projects. And then we're going to want to do another round of community engagement each step of the way. So that's what what we're recommending as staff in terms of how we change our approach. And want you to know that in order to not lose time, we already asked the consultant to get started on this in May, when we heard from council, because it was work they're going to have to do anyhow. So they've already started more the compilation of the technical data, all the old existing plans, what do they say? And starting to pull that together to get ready for something that can now be more brought forward in a public setting for community engagement, input, those types of steps. And if you want more details on the approach, we can definitely discuss it more further with you. But one of the key things that it's been successfully used is the concept of street typologies, where you kind of have examples of different ways you can give modal priorities and green street elements. You get to see how much right of way they take. And this will play back in your feasibility analysis in terms of if you want to do it all, do we have any streets with all that right of way? But if, where you want to do protected bikeways versus you're okay with an enhanced bicycle lane, what does that mean? And where you want wider sidewalks versus more the standard 5 to 6 foot width, how you trade all that off. So I'd say next slide. So the other piece, of course, we heard from council is what more should we be doing to evaluate the feasibility as we move into identifying what's possible. So typically on a plan like this, that's citywide in scope and dealing with a whole system, your usual feasibility analysis tends to be more high-level qualitative evaluation. So it considers factors related to costs and benefits, but more on a scale, high, medium, low, order of magnitude, but does not attempt to develop dollar values. Because telling you how much it's going to cost to put a protected bikeway on this particular street would be a real shot in the dark without doing a little more analysis of existing conditions of that street, utilities, all kinds of other aspects that can truly affect cost. But you still can come up with a sense based upon our recent bidding results and other pieces, how much it typically can cost. So you get a sense of it, but more in an order of magnitude as opposed to more of a real cost. The other piece is the benefits side of things. We all can easily recognize that there's a tremendous benefit with a mode shift to active transportation, to improving health, air quality, safety, economic impacts. And yes, there's all kinds of models out there and so on where you could try to generate a value of what's one life worth, what is it worth in terms of reducing the potential of some kind of disease from the air quality or something. But that is a tremendous amount of work to try to come up with dollar values to do a real true cost benefit analysis at that stage. But you can still do a qualitative assessment in terms of there's a lot of value to these improvements and how much different infrastructure treatments can support a mode shift or economic impacts, but more on a qualitative range side of things. And that is what we're recommending if you go to the next slide. So we're recommending a two-step feasibility analysis. The first step will be when we're doing the holistic network development, where we're looking at it system-wide. And this is where we start, again, that vision is that balancing of the different modes, dealing with the constraints that we have to deal with. We have a general sense of our right of way and curb to curb. We can't tell you it's exact on every single block of the whole. How many miles do we have a street?
147.
147 miles. Okay, of streets, city streets, thank you. But we have a general idea, right? And therefore, we can do an assessment of what the space is that's available that can support the different kinds of approaches that could be made. And that'd be sort of the network level feasibility. So we can recommend something that will require an additional 30 feet of right of way all along the corridor, if that's what's desired, but the costs are going to shoot way up. So, this is what this network feasibility starts to tell you on a grand scale of how do things could potentially fit. And then if you want to think right away, now, that's a whole different matter. And then when we get to the identifying projects, we can apply certain factors and criteria to do a project level feasibility. And these are just some examples. And they can be done on more of a scale, a qualitative order of magnitude. We have an idea, we can come up with that, typical project costs for different types of infrastructure. Might be some cases where we do say, this is so important, this corridor, that we may want to be prepared for some kind of acquisition. Then there's interagency coordination and constructability and environmental issues. So those are things that we can look at, again, more in a checkbox or high, medium, low to evaluate what it may take to deliver these projects. So with all of that, we are adding scope to our consultant agreement, and we would like to come back to council then in October to recommend adding this scope, the additional community outreach, the additional feasibility analysis. We're working up a cost estimate with the consultant and for the council to approve amending the scope and adding to the consultant contract. This also will add some time to completing the project, 6 to 9 months over what we may have been able to do. However, in terms of adding time, we want to be very thoughtful and have a really good plan for the city. But it doesn't mean we're waiting until the plan is done before we're taking action. And I think you're all aware that we have several projects right now in design, going under construction, that is working for complete streets. We actually have 3 projects in the last year where councils approved road diets. California Street Pilot Project, Miramonte, and El Monte. So we've been able to use data from the original Access NV, but also the local road safety plan and Vision Zero action plan that's coming to council for final approval next week. And you saw it a few months ago, provided excellent data to inform staff of what we want to proceed with. And in fact, it provides direct input into this plan as well. But based upon that, we already, for instance, know, based upon that study and other studies and community engagement, Ringstorf corridor is incredibly high priority. So rather than waiting for this plan to be done, staff already used the data we gathered and successfully applied for a Caltrans grant to do the initial design concept feasibility analysis for active transportation improvements on Ringstorff corridor. And that's coming to council next week as well to see if council will approve us accepting the grant and getting started on that work. So we really wanted to point out for you and the community that even though it takes us a little more time to develop this plan, it doesn't mean we're not using the information we already have and still taking steps forward on active transportation. Next slide. So next steps is we've begun work on holistic network development and soon we'll start community engagement on it. If you support staff's recommendations, the revised approach will come to council in October to amend the consultant agreement. And we'll be planning to bring, after we go through our community engagement on holistic network, be back to this committee in early 2025 before we go to council. And that brings to the second bullet, a little bit out of order here. We are planning to make, because this is such an important project, from now on every one of your agendas, you're going to receive some kind of update on where we're at on the active transportation plan. Sometimes it'll just be a verbal update, but we will be checking in with you, staff will be at least, so that you can see that progress is being made, that we are still moving forward and where we're at on things. So with that, I know I took a little while on this, but I really wanted a chance to lay the groundwork here. So we are requesting and recommending that you review the vision statement, and if you're okay with it, recommend it to council or ask staff to relook at a few things and recommend to council that this revised approach and the expanded scope for approval.
Great. Thank you. So we'll start with the committee member questions. Anyone to start? Okay.
So one of my questions, this may require a little back and forth, but I'm wondering when you're engaging with the community or talking about the development of a network, how much are you including? Maybe this is a question on street typology, but I have in the past, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because that's what this question is about. I mostly see bike lanes that are direct corridors adjacent to heavy car corridors. This would be like California Street, El Camino, Ringstorff, Miramonte pretty much, El Monte, and not so much neighborhood streets, bike boulevards, and shared and slow streets. And I know my impression is that if we're going to, that other cities use those a lot, not just, I mean, don't get me wrong, the direct corridors, the El Camino, the California, et cetera, those are important. But I think in order to encourage more people to bike, and I have to say personally, I will avoid I voted for them. I think they're important, but I'll avoid them. And I know when I say that, a lot of other people say they will too. When I bike on the Stevens Creek Trail and I take neighborhood streets to get there. When my kids went from downtown to Castro School, we took Latham. We tried to avoid that. We didn't take California Street. We try to avoid, or El Camino, we try to avoid those major car corridors. So how much is this a question on street typology? Or, how much will those alternative street types be? How much will they be a part of the network? And how much, when we're engaging with the community, do we highlight those and maybe use examples like I'm gonna mangle the name of this, the Eileen Fletcher, the Brand Street, Bike Boulevard in Palo Alto, or the Sheridan Slow Streets and neighborhood streets in Berkeley, where sort of two ends of them are blocked off. How much do we share those things that we're not doing very much in Mountain View, but that we could? And when we engage with the community, if they haven't seen those, they may not bring them up themselves. That's a long question, but.
No, we appreciate the question. And I think starting with bike boulevards, that's a key one to talk about because we we technically have a couple of designated bike boulevards, but they do not rise at all in any way, shape, or to best practices for a bicycle boulevard. So I'm gonna invite Rhea to talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I think this is something that we hope will come out of the community engagement on the holistic network. A couple of things to, caveat are that, for example, Berkeley and Palo Alto, they have a little bit more of a grid pattern. And so there are available, Seattle, same thing, they, in those places, they have those kind of parallel routes where they can put their bike boulevards. It's a little trickier here where the city is sliced by the 237 and the 85 and 101. And so trying to figure out how you get the whole way across the city on a local street is a little tricky. I think there are some tweaks that we could, like, for example, I think maybe Dana might be, but I think the actual routes, I think that we'll figure out
Well,
through
a
the
little
process.
kink in it
Yeah.
doesn't it doesn't have to be all the way straight through this. If you move over one, move back. that
Yeah.
way.
And then I think also
Sure.
having we want a network, so it wouldn't just be one route, north, south, and east, west, but we want people to be able to not have to travel too far out of direction. So there would be a little bit of redundancy in the network.
If I may.
Yeah.
It's definitely a tool in the toolbox. And there are streets where that's the only toolbox, for reasons that the director had mentioned. That there's just not enough space to do something else. And maybe that's not even appropriate to do something else. Maybe that level of volume and speed lend itself to that treatment. And maybe a little bit more speed control is necessary to get it into that area. But certainly internal to the city of Mountain View, I think there's really good candidates. And then we do have these kinks, as you both are mentioning, especially when we make connections to the other communities around us. So it's definitely part of the toolbox and something that we would consider. So when we build this holistic network, we're starting with the previous plans that have been approved and reviewed and had a bunch of public input. And we're looking for refinements and where things still make sense, where they don't make sense. A big part of our bicycle transportation plan has what we call class 3 bicycle boulevards in it. And so that's not going away.
And do we bring it up? I don't attend all the community engagement meetings. Do we sort of provide leadership, not just ask, how would you like it, to people who maybe haven't seen different examples, but also show, like you say, best practices for bike boulevards or shared streets and slow streets. I feel like around the Bay Area in the US, there, particularly since the pandemic, there are more and more of these. Are we providing leadership and showing those examples, not just asking people possibly have limited local experience, what do you want?
Yes, and I think that there are good examples, even fairly close by. We went and looked at Chilco Street in Menlo Park today. I think that's a really great example of like a street that balances various different modes. The fire truck was going down there, the bus, there were people riding in the bike facility and pedestrians walking, and there was things growing there as well. So that's a particular street, but I think there are examples that we can take photos of that are in this climate zone and that are, good examples of the different things that we're looking at.
Okay, so great. And are we also, as a part of this, are we looking at different sidewalk typologies? Because in my mind, there are a bunch of good kinds of sidewalks and a bunch of bad kinds. There's not one way to do it well, but there's a lot of ways to do it badly. Are we offering different sidewalk design typologies? Okay,
Yes.
good. That's good. With pictures and, okay, very good. Let me see what my other, is Renksdorf envisioned as, somebody asked me this today and I didn't know the answer. The upcoming Renksdorf, is that seen as going to be designed as a complete green street or
Yes. So we,
Street.
when we put in the application, we had a chat with Caltrans staff and we said, we have this project, it's called Ringstorff Green Complete Streets. And they said, we define complete streets as including green, so you can take that word out.
Oh,
So if
they said that to
they,
you?
they said that to us, yeah,
Oh,
based on their
okay.
design information bulletin 94 from just this year. So it is part of it and it's in the list of elements that will be considered for the corridor. But the title is just with the complete street part.
Somebody told me that green had been taken out and they were worried about it, so I'm gonna make sure that it, whether the word's in there or not, it's in there in reality.
It's in there in the list of elements that will
Yeah,
be.
it's clearly
Okay.
defined in the council report that this is in the scope.
And what about California Street? People told me the green elements were taken out of that. Is that similar or is that just a vicious rumor?
No, the scope of work that was brought to council approved for the pilot project that included. And again, remember, that's a pilot, so some of this that's being installed isn't a permanent installation. But it does still include the planter boxes as one of the different methods of vertical separation. Remember, we're gonna use this because it's 1.2 miles long to also just test different vertical separations for the bicycle lane. So that is still included, but I will give you a heads up because this is actually on our website. The bids came in very, very high. And we're gonna need more money, so it will be coming to council to recommend to approve the construction contract and add more money to make it happen.
Okay.
But it's worth it. It's a good project, and that's what you're gonna hear from staff.
Those are the two streets I had questions on, the green elements from the public and, do you think all streets, you said something about all streets needing all, to address all modes of transportation. And of course, that's not the way, Stevens Creek Trail doesn't allow cars and, there's, that's not a street.
trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking the streets themselves.
But I can imagine, like in some neighborhoods, particularly gridded streets, you might emphasize a more complete bike lane on one street, you might emphasize walking wider sidewalks on another. They don't have to be all exactly the same. Am I right, or am I going down the wrong path?
You are correct, and there is not a one size fits all approach, so it is important that every street does accommodate all the modes, but the level of infrastructure for each mode varies.
Yeah, because I don't want them to all be the same expanse with green stripes on both sides. I want them to be different. I think. Some more questions, unless I think of another one.
Maybe Member Benchik.
Thanks. Yes, so I keep on thinking more questions as we're sitting here based on what was presented in Councilmember Hicks's questions. But one that's kind of off topic here. What's a palm card?
It's like a postcard, but it doesn't get mailed to people. So it's like when we go to the farmer's market, we give them, it looks like I call it a postcard, but apparently they're called palm cards. And people can take them and put them in their purse or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Never heard that term before. Okay, so based on the questions that Councilmember Hicks asked, it also caught my attention when you said each street has to accommodate all modes. And I was trying to envision what that really means. And if you're a bicyclist, does that mean like at one end, nothing would change about the road and you kind of are in the flow with vehicles to protected, separated bike lanes or anything in between? Is that the lowest form, just nothing changes with the road, but obviously you're not prohibiting bicyclists from using them?
Basically, there are what they call different classes of bike improvements.
Yeah.
Class 1, of course, is your trails and paths, like Sept Trail. Class 2 is your traditional bike lane where you typically see just a stripe on the road and some signs. They have to have signs saying bike lane. And now there's also buffered bike lanes where it's more paint on the road. Class 3 is more of the share of the road approach where you have, we got very low volume traffic and bicycles and vehicles, and usually can be somewhat of a narrow road situation. And class 4 now is the protected bikeways where you fully protected with some kind of vertical element between the bike and the car. So it varies what type of infrastructure that you would have that would serve the bicyclists on a particular road. And there are various things that, that features that you would look at that would help determine that, including the volumes, speeds, the right of way that's available, types of uses. And so that's what it's meant by, you're gonna serve bicyclists one way or another, but as said, not every street is gonna have a buffered bike lane or a protected bikeways, that type of thing. Now, in terms of can it switch up along the road? It is important to be careful that it's just like for a pedestrian. You don't do a sidewalk halfway down a block and then you abandon them to walk in the roadway. You want complete segments, complete networks that, so that when you're dealing with the different comfort level of bicyclists, that they don't suddenly find themselves in a position where they're not comfortable because you just kind of drop them off in there. Having said that, I'll turn it over to the experts to see if there's anything more that you want to
Well, I
add.
think that you mentioned there could be streets also that don't have any of the above, and that's also a possibility.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, so I'm familiar with the classes, I guess, I was asking, is there also nothing? And you're just riding your bike on the road, and that will be considered, okay.
Yeah, and I think there is guidance now. The Caltrans design information bulletin I mentioned kind of lays out where the shared facilities, even without sharrows, are most appropriate. So, and actually a lot of the city, is kind of mostly, fairly quiet neighborhood streets. So in many situations, that's okay.
Okay. Okay, and, let's see. Is there a standard definition, of Green Street?
There are several definitions. The US EPA has a Green Street Handbook, and it's really defined in terms of green stormwater infrastructure. And I think that traditionally that has been the focus. My understanding in Mountain View is that we have a more expansive definition that also encompasses issues of heat and canopy and species biodiversity.
And, when residents talk about the Green Street, were they envisioning what is gonna be done during the pilot on California, or were they envisioning something else? Like, are we all talking the same thing here when we talk about green streets?
Well, I think the pilot for California, I mean, we're not digging up asphalt. And so when we think of like the final product of a green street, it's going to be different from like we don't want to do green streets just with planters long term, because that's going to be more maintenance and less permanent. So I think when we think of long-term green streets, that's a bit different from what we're thinking in terms of what we're testing for the pilot. And hopefully I haven't spoken out of turn, Robert.
No, I think that's good.
Okay. I'm still struggling a bit with what will the network look like? Like the consultant that's working on this, can you describe to me what visually will be prepared? Like what is their end product when it comes to the network?
Okay.
Do you mean at the end of the plan, or do you mean what's going to come for the next round of community engagement? Because they were
I
slightly
think the
different.
holistic network, is that what you're?
I understand holistic network, yes, but do you mean
I'm talking about the end
the end
product,
plan?
but I guess if they're substantially different, I want to
Yeah.
know.
They're iterative. So the first step is we've already done this, look back to the previous plans and if it wasn't in GIS, but most of it was, we layer it all together. And then we take our community input, we layer that, staff input, we layer that. And now we have this map, which is largely maybe 80% what you see in the bicycle transportation plan. But with more stuff to it. And so in that map, you'll see lines and the line says class 1, 4, 2, 3, whatever it might be. And what we'll be doing, so that's all gonna happen. And that's more or less that first stage of community engagement. And that's where we're starting to get people's feedback. Do you like this idea? Do you like that idea? Then we're able to score and get a certain set of projects. And then we're gonna dive into those set of projects, which is about 5 years worth of work. So we look back in the past 5 years to see what we can do. Then we forecast out the same amount of work for the next 5 years. And then for that, we're looking to create a cross section. So it gives us a good concept, but it's typical. It is not the details about this road has a curve like this. It's just the basic road width is like this. Can we fit it in? This is what it would look like. And then we bring that to the public for review there. So you have that line map, which you had in the bicycle transportation plan, and then the evolution is now we'll have a cross section. So we'll bring you into it and you can see one cut of what that roadway would look like, and we'll get that input. That has been so important because, just as an example, one of our streets in the bicycle transportation plan had suggested a facility that if you had done that cut of the roadway, you would have seen it and have the space to do that.
So if I, however, let's step
Yes.
back for a minute. It's not just about the bicycles. So
Absolutely,
the
sidewalks.
holistic network, and this is where we get to the street typology and the different ones that can show, you can have a street that is providing a class 4 bikeway. So now that's protected bikeway. It uses up the most right of way. And then we're gonna have, kind of like a 6-foot sidewalk with a park strip that has your trees and so on. And that's what that typology would look like. And then another one where it might be more of a enhanced bicycle lane situation. And what do these pedestrian treatments look like and so on. And this is where we get to balancing the modal priorities, where one street may have a higher level of infrastructure for bicyclists, but then another one that parallels it might put a higher priority on infrastructure investment for the pedestrian, that type of thing. And I know this is going to be tricky, but that's really what the holistic network map needs to look like. And it's a lot more than a 5-year plan to develop.
If I can,
Yeah, go ahead.
if I can add one more thing. So I think kind of at a basic level, there's some north-south routes and there's some east-west routes, and maybe there could be a couple of other routes, different angles, but we'll see. And so I think in terms of the bicycles, there would be kind of key, like, I guess, like recommended routes through the city. And we are also using the suggested routes to school as part of this as well, because they're some of our key destinations. And then thinking about where the pedestrians go as well with these particular focuses. And so one route might start off as a class 4 facility. You might merge into a trail halfway down and turn it into a linear parkway with, a class 1 facility. But this is kind of the key, that key north-south route along that thing. And we want there to be various options throughout the city. And so it's basically like a network overlaying on our city roadway and trails map.
And if I'll build off of both of those things, and we're doing the same thing I described for bicycles for pedestrians. We have the network, the GIS layers, where the sidewalk is, where it isn't. We're getting information on the width and the surface quality. And then mid-block crossings are an important part of that network, also an extremely important part. That all layers together. And then when we go into that cross-sectional view, I definitely was talking between the curves, but we're not looking between the curves, we're looking between the right of way. And in order to deliver green streets, we're going to have to look through the entire right of way section. And where does that sidewalk, how big is that sidewalk? Does that sidewalk and those green streets? They need to be prioritized against that individual road, the community's input, and the other modes. And in many cases, choices will have to be made about what to do inside of that right of way. So while I neglected to provide it as my example, I have already seen that holistic network map for the pedestrians. And so we'll have them, we did attempt to layer them together. It is really, really busy when you do that. So it probably won't be something we do there, but when we look at that cross section, when we actually think about the road, is absolutely something that we will be doing together.
And can I just lay one more thing on, which is that in some cases, these are going onto our streets. There could be spots where our network is going along and then we have a super block that kind of blocks the whole thing. And in that case, we might have a dotted line that somewhere between here and here, eventually we would like a paseo. So if something develops in this area, we're going to request that that super block be broken down. So
And
that would
this
be
is
part
where
of it
we
as well.
build on some of the precise plans, because some of the precise plans also looked at super blocks and recommended, and that's very important, because if it's not in the precise plan or another planning document, we have to wait for the redevelopment to happen. And so all that does have to merge together, because some of this we're not gonna be able to do on our own as a city. We have to wait for an area to redevelop. It's what we've been dealing with El Camino Real and that precise plan to get the wider sidewalk and more room for trees and so on. Is that precise plan set it up that as new development happens, we can require that they dedicate 4 additional feet of right of way? Because believe me, if we tried to buy it, the cost would be astronomical.
Yeah.
But as they develop it, we get to a situation where we can evolve the streetscape to what we want it to be. And I think that's the final piece. You know, as we talk about it, this active transportation plan, the holistic network can't be a 5-year network. If you really want to see where we want to get to, we have to understand it's 10 to 20 years if you're looking at the whole city. Because the more you're going to talk about, we're actually going to rip up and reconstruct a street and move curbs, you're now getting into the tens of millions of dollars just to do one street. So that's gonna be the challenge when we come out the other side of this, is there can be, like there was with the bicycle transportation plan, sort of the top 10. And these are the ones we want to try to accomplish in the next 5 years. Some of this may have to be phased. We may not be able to get to a complete green street everywhere, because it just won't be enough money to do it all at once. Do we make some interim improvements and we keep building our way there? And that's basically what's now gonna happen with California. At 1.2 miles long, after this has been put in place, to convert it to more permanent setup, move away from the planters and actually plant trees, to change the protected intersections. Based upon something Palo Alto did not that long ago, we're looking at $35 to $40 million project. But maybe we can take it block by block and break it into chunks. But meanwhile, we have the advantages of the pilot program that still improves things for bicycles and pedestrians and moves us in that direction. So again, and then my final piece on this is when we do prioritize projects, it is important that it's sort of a group. And we're not a stickler saying this absolutely has to be 1, 2, 3. We want these, but not the high priority ones, so that we can take advantage of grants. And they have criteria, and sometimes your number 1 project is not going to score well, but your number 2 project will score great. Or a major redevelopment's happening. Oh, the iron's hot, let's strike.
Mhm.
So that will also be the thing, is even though you might see the number, it's important that there's flexibility in how.
So how much is feasibility taken into consideration as you lay out the networks? Or realistic, like, in this arena?
So definitely, as we mentioned, in terms of that 2-step feasibility approach,
Yeah.
do you have that one? On the holistic network piece that they're talking about, we're gonna do an initial assessment of the space needs.
Mhm.
Because honestly, you can imagine to get to complete green streets for Ringstorff Corridor, if it's something that requires more than the right of way we currently have, that's gonna be incredibly challenging.
So isn't it? Sorry. More than just space, it's also like railroad tracks, freeways, all kinds of other issues. Will that be taken into consideration at the network level?
maybe not as much at the network level, because those are just constrained barriers at a point in time, and you don't wanna have your whole corridor set up based upon what's happening there. And so you know, yes, going through a freeway interchange area or dealing with an existing bridge structure, and you can't just promise to rebuild the bridge, may require some, special design treatments or techniques to get past that particular barrier.
Mhm.
But it wouldn't necessarily shape how you want to approach the entire corridor.
Okay.
Maybe that goes on the wish list for the interchange project. On the ballot trip.
Okay, let's see here. I think that's it for now. Thank you. Great.
I have a couple that she made me think of, but I go ahead.
Oh, is that okay?
Oh,
Absolutely. All right, so, thank you very much for the comprehensive overview of everything. My questions have a little bit to do, I guess, with the unnamed issue, which I think is cars. And, so my first question is, how will our active transportation plan take into account like opportunities to remove conflict streets? So, for example, Middlefield and Shoreline. So what I'm often seeing when I'm on Middlefield and Shoreline is people going into the bike lane and creating a fourth lane to make the right turn where the gas station is. If you're going down Middlefield in particular, so going south on Middlefield and turning right onto Shoreline. So I mean, there's a couple different things because you can make a right on red in California, but people are using that as like as a lane. And how might they, that's just one, what I would call in my mind. It might not be the correct technical term, but like a conflict little area. How can we use the ATP to address that? Because I see often people on their scooter or their bicycle or trying to cross that, shoreline Middlefield, and it's very unsafe, and I've seen people almost get hit on multiple different levels.
So I think some of these issues have been actually highlighted in the Vision Zero Action Plan based on the collision history. And so some of those issues can be addressed with things like protected bikeways and protected intersections, which would be focused in, the areas of greatest need.
So those would be identified as areas of greatest need
For the more protected facilities.
in the ATP. Or in the network.
Actually,
Like, how would,
in both. So some
Okay.
of them have already been identified in the Vision Zero Action Plan. And then the active transportation plan also addresses the issue of connectivity as well.
So one thing we're gonna look at is as part of the scoring criteria is crashes. And that, while is not a perfect proxy for conflict, it is definitely an important metric and does represent real conflict. And so that will help us prioritize where to go. It will also definitely to some extent prioritize the level of facility or separation, whether you're pedestrian or bicycle, that's provided. We will not get detailed with the active transportation plan though. So when it comes to that intersection level, like protected intersection, we'll have a statement supporting protected intersections. But that level of detail comes later in a project process.
through the CIP?
Precise plan, CIP, yes.
Okay. I
Um,
just am trying to understand how they're connected, because this kind of goes into my second question is, how do we update residents on like existing approved projects, right? So we're talking about this and this, you're telling me it's part of what we've already identified in our Vision Zero plan. I know that there's many different people brought up to me and some of them we talked about, right? There's improvements along California on Miramonte that haven't happened yet. And so as the active transportation plan is coming forward, residents are asking questions, like, okay, well, what about these other projects that are on the list? So I'm just not sure, how do we take those into account, or how can we answer those questions as people are hearing about our active transportation plan?
So we have done some work to clean up our website. We had like 2 different lists of projects. One were transportation projects and the other were capital projects, and people don't necessarily know what's in what shop. And I understand that, do we have some other work going on in terms of a project?
We have several.
It's Robert Gonzalez,
You
principal
just stand up and
civil engineer.
introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Robert Gonzalez, the principal civil engineer in the Civil Infrastructure Group. We have several resources on the city's webpage. One of them is the planned capital projects. We put it on a map and we label it by year. If we tried to label every single element, it would get really busy very quickly. So we just do it by year. So we show which sections of the roads are planned for improvement. So we're working on making that a little bit more interactive. We're trying to get, we have more GIS features there, but right now it is essentially a PDF that shows planned improvements. And then if you want to go further, you can certainly do a search where you can go to the capital projects webpage and find individual projects like California, like the like Middlefield that is just kicking off, that describes the scope of elements for those things. So we need to get you like a home card.
We're working on it.
Well, I would just say, I think that the community engagement piece that staff highlighted is really critical. And so I think as part of this council being able to update residents on these projects that are of high profile, high concern are helpful so that they know, yes, we're doing this, here's the update, and we're also trying to do, something else. So that would just be my.
It is definitely a goal and something
Cause I don't
that
think
needs to be done to really, there's a lot more work we can do with our website to provide information on projects currently in design, in construction, what it's going to look like. And in addition to that, as you do community outreach and so on, it is helpful that since California Street, we know what the pilot project's gonna look like. We have, we can bring those to meetings, say, this is already what's planned. Middlefield and Shoreline, when we go in and put in the Shoreline project that's under design, it's gonna add protected bikeways and it's going to add some protected intersections, which starts to address those right turning cars, because it's giving the bicyclists a place to be that cars cannot go into when it's a protected intersection. So I think it's a very, very good point, and it's an area that has been long on my wish list for as soon as we had staffing time and capacity, that we could really improve how we put out, public information available. We've got a tremendous number of projects in the works.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that was one of the things I heard from residents. And then for the existing condition analysis, so I know that one of the things Sept mentioned was maybe code and ordinance changes. I think something kind of that dovetails off of my 2 questions are I don't know if would we incorporate in enforcement or would an existing condition be existing state or city law related to how vehicles currently operate, I guess. So, because I'm just thinking about, the crossing into the bike lanes, but also the right turn, and that to me is an existing condition, and I'm not sure how to include that. So apologies for being eloquent in how I'm asking it, but I feel like to me, that's an existing condition, and I'm not sure how we're capturing that. Like, Is it just we accept and we know that this is an existing issue?
Well, the first thing we have to be aware of is the California Vehicle Code overrides local codes. That's first and foremost. So for instance, the vehicle code allows vehicles to enter the bike lane, what is it, 100 feet before the intersection?
It's dependent on speed.
Depending upon speed, okay, yeah, speed. Please don't take me in front of the driver exam. It's a-
They don't
But this
ask
is why
that
we have the
question.
dashed lines at that point
That's
to
right.
signal.
It's actually even longer than the dash lines.
Yeah, that's true.
But I see a
But-
lot, no dash lines
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's actually,
Yeah.
drivers are permitted to enter
before the.
typically before the,
The
So at
dash
least
lines
100
use this
feet.
kind of guidance, but yes, I thought it was longer too.
Yeah.
But that's where we cannot regulate certain things if they're regulated by the California Vehicle Code. But then we can look at our infrastructure options. So again, that's where protected intersection creates a situation where the vehicles can't enter the bike area because it has vertical separation.
I'm also wondering about speed. So I know that that is something that I see a lot as well, is just a lot of speeding. So I'm just, then that to me is also an existing condition that is affecting why people may not bike or walk, to be
Mhm.
honest. So I was just trying to figure out how to incorporate that. The next question I have is extending our existing networks. So for example, actually CTC, I think last year talked about creating bike lanes along Calderon, which already exists. But once you get to Calderon and Dana, it's not the same type of facility for biking. And is that where, Ms. Lowe, you were talking about, it may move from facility, this type of facility to a different type of facility to maybe, as Councilmember Matashek was saying, no facility, and we're going, the ATP is gonna take that into account. And we're,
so Calderon, there were bike facilities that were completed between, was that Mercy and El Camino just recently? So they're both class 2. So it is actually the same class of facility, but they're
but like when you get to, when you go from El Camino and say you're going to Dana,
Mhm.
and I'm just thinking about if people might be going to, what is it, Landals, right? It's different
Mhm.
once you make that turn from Calderon onto Dana, is my recollection. So I'm trying to understand how the ATP takes that into account. So you had talked a little bit about it may change, is the idea that we would go, what is the most projected, 4 or no?
Yes,
4. That we, the gold standard is 4, but it may turn into a 1, but we're trying to prioritize our safe routes to school. I'm just trying to understand how.
So I think you wouldn't want to go from a 4 to a nothing, for example. But you want to have if that's the corridor that you want to prioritize biking, then you want to have a kind of a consistent quality, a consistent experience or level of traffic stress along that facility.
Part of the constraints are curb to curb and right of way.
Yeah.
So those are data points that we're going to need to have that we don't currently have with the bicycle transportation plan. So to make those evaluations, speed, volume, those are other data points that we did collect as part of the existing conditions phase of this plan to make those evaluations, and the locations of those data points were thoughtful to prepare us for some of the questions you're asking. But yeah, I mean, as the road changes, no, you're not talking specifically about Calderon or Dana, but
I was just trying to find
Yeah.
an example that we might all know about.
San,
but I-
San Antonio, for
I see
instance,
it, yeah.
if you go far enough north, it gets really calm and quiet. And so maybe you do drop the class down and don't provide the highest class at that point. If you have the space, you continue it for reasons of consistency, but There are other reasons of cost and things that have to be kept in mind. So it's a long way to say is even one single road name is context sensitive. Right, Rainstorm is another example.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the, when we're talking about our active transportation plan, I just was trying to understand if there's an opportunity to talk about what we're doing in terms of like our vehicular traffic, right? And it's great to talk about how we're trying to get people, like what we're trying to do in our vision statement, which I know we're gonna give feedback on later, really resonated with me, but I feel like we also need to do a shift. And so I don't know how the active transportation plan can encourage a shift in how we're using our roadways. Because some people may still need to use cars, right? And so, multimodal is always great. I understand we're trying to increase, opportunities for people to not use their cars, or for when we do, how do we make sure it's like, it's a safe environment for that as well? And I'm trying to figure out if that's a place where we talk about it in the ATP at all, so. Okay, great. You had other questions?
Yes, so, questions brought up, the two other committee members made me think of some more questions, but only a couple. So the first, jumping off what the chair just said about car-oriented rules, the big one that comes to mind for me is no right on red. And this happens to me all the time and other people too. I live near St. Joseph's Church. I always shop at Ava's and the farmer's market. I hesitate to go to Rose Market, equal distance, but I have to cross El Camino. And I'm almost run over frequently by people taking right on red, totally unapologetic about it, even when they almost run into me. And I think that's true, that's the example near me, and I know other people, they won't walk to the hardware store, they won't, it means that it's hurting those businesses to some degree. Or we get in our cars, and I think that's true all over the city. So no right on red in particular, that seems like something is that a part of the ATP? It seems like something we could, I know Palo Alto kind of moved it up front. Is that something council should do separately? How does that fit into all this?
All right, so I'll start by saying that, no right on red, you will see, is also listed in the local road safety plan and visual action plan as a countermeasure that can be applied. And we continue to work, with traffic engineering to evaluate locations where we would like to see no right on red. The questions come up about El Camino Real and the paving project in Palo Alto. We definitely are in discussions with Caltrans, about no right on red along El Camino. You will actually see in the report next week on local road safety plan, where it specifically says there's definitely gonna be a no right on red that, we've talked to Caltrans about at Grant Road and El Camino. We have about 7 other locations we're looking at and talking to them about putting in, and there's plenty of time to do that as part of the paving project. One of the ways we at staff is looking at this is, it isn't, we want to say no to no right turn on red. We want to make sure we're prepared for it. In some of these locations, the no right on red will mean that where you were clearing a lot of cars and there was a high right turning demand, you're going to see a lot more queuing back. And that's okay. Except when you start blocking a lot of driveways with the queue, the question is, what are you going to do with those right turning vehicles? And we're very aware, in some locations, El Camino and Castro's definitely looking at that. But we're also aware, I don't know if I told you my grand experiment one time where I said, what if I follow the no right on red and I'm on El Camino turning right on Castro coming to City Hall? It took me 2 signal changes before I could make my right, because of course I'm not gonna go on the red, even if there's nobody crossing, no pets. I'm gonna wait for the green, but now people are crossing Castro and I have to wait. Oh, they just finished. I'm red again. I can't go. Now, there are solutions. There are changes to signal timing that could be done. There's ability maybe to look at, blank out right turn signal times. There are things that could be done where you can balance the need to make those right turns happen, but not have them turning right on red. So one of the things we want to evaluate for each of these locations is that if we're really worried about there's a high volume of right turns, can we work with Caltrans to get signal timing changes made, get other changes made? Because also when you have a backup of a lot of right turns, that Grant is when we're watching, gonna watch very carefully. People will start going through that shopping center to make their right turn. It's very dangerous to have a lot of cars cutting through a shopping center, a lot of pedestrians in that area. So we don't want to set up a situation where they're gonna start doing that. And then the other piece is then you start seeing it start to block the through lanes, and now we're blocking an intersection down further upstream, that's a safe route to school, and now that's all getting blocked up. So we believe it can be done. We work with Caltrans, and I think you will see several no right turns on reds go in on El Camino, but we want it done thoughtfully. And of course, these are controlled by Caltrans, so we have to really work with them also. Even after they go in, we'll look at what's happening and we'll work with them and say, okay, can you fix the signal timing? Or can we make a different change to the signal infrastructure? Something like that. So that's what we're gonna work, because unfortunately, this is what we're dealing with. Way back when these streets were designed in such a way that right turn on red handled some of your right turning capacity. So now we need another way to handle the right turning capacity.
So I hear that you're working, the answer is you're
We're working on it.
as part of Vision Zero and as part of.
May I,
Specific.
may I add?
Yeah.
Before the Caltrans situation and the right on red and all that, the transportation division and traffic division have had multiple meetings on no right on red from a broad perspective, not actually excluding El Camino because it's the Caltrans roadway. So,
It's
and
part of step 3.
yes, absolutely. And that would be for across the city, and where we are on that is our consultant working on looking at best practices for selecting locations and measuring metrics before and after, so that we know the effects and some of the things that the director is speaking about. So then this was months ago. So we're aware of the situation and tend to talk about it, bring it to you for further discussion inside of the ATV.
I mean, honestly, if people would just look before they go, often that's the problem. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
clearly visible, they're just not even, they just think they have the right to go forward and pedestrians don't exist. So my other question was, there was the class 1 through 4, bikeways, but how do slow and share, and then, remember Matachek asked about, streets where you do nothing, but, some of the slow and shared streets that I'm familiar with often have, their neighborhood streets, and they have something kind of blocking you from just blasting into the neighborhood street at a very high speed, and that tells you that it's a neighborhood street and you have to slow down. So there's nothing on the street itself. There's no green stripe, there's no protection, but they feel they're protected only at the opening to the street, at the intersection,
Mhm.
by kind of blocking you from, it's no longer a street that you can just blast your way down the whole thing. So is that in the type 1 through 4, or is it a whole different animal?
Which is a type 3, and those are,
Right.
class 3, which counts for nothing, counts for bike boulevard, counts for the most heavy-handed bike boulevard, for lack of a better word, where you might have volume control, you might have complete volume control, so cars can't go in and out, cars might only one way, might do speed humps. We base, and then also very, very important to bike boulevard are the signs and the pavement markings, so that you don't feel like you're lost. And so we have a lot of candidates like Church. It's basically a bike boulevard if we just put a label on it. Put that marking, put the pavement markings down, put the signs. opportunity.
And then when you're talking about the, you know, the footage, the distance you need in order to do all the things you want, do you ever for streets like Renksdorf consider, so there's, you know, you might want sidewalks and bike lanes and parking and a planting strip. Do you ever, if you don't have room for all of that, do you ever consider in this bulb outs, so you could have car parked and then a bulb out with a tree and then another car parked? Okay,
Yes.
good, because I don't see enough of that here. And it's kind of a way of not needing to buy more space, but getting a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And maybe eventually getting rid of all that parking when we know what these cars we have here. Okay, those are all my questions. Do you have any others? Go ahead. Go ahead, yeah, of course.
So I appreciated the question about, what do you tell residents? And how do they know what projects we have? Where do they find all this? And, I think I talked about this last time, but I'm wondering, what is preventing? Why can't we just have one plan and not have like Vision Zero separate from, active transportation plan, separate from the safety plan? Why can't they all just be one plan?
They do serve different purposes and they have different focuses and they're optimizing different things. So for example, the Vision Zero action plan / local road safety plan, we actually combine the two of them. They're optimizing for safety. And they're also required for certain grant sources.
We have to have a plan that says local roads.
Yes. The active transportation plan, safety is one of the elements, connectivity is another one, and so there's various. It's got a few other goals, and it's just focused on active transportation. The Vision Zero action plan is actually all modes. And then Access MV was compiling all the past plans and putting them all in one thing, and it also included transit as well. So they do serve different functions. There is overlap. So for example, what we achieved with the Vision Zero action plan gets fed in as an input to this one. And so we're not starting from zero each time.
Yeah, so it could be that the active transportation plan could be the one plan that residents could look at. And we have the others for other purposes. But the active transportation plan could be like this is the entire plan, and it pulls in elements from the others that are taken into consideration to develop the active transportation plan. Is that true?
Well, the active transportation plan is not addressing vehicular elements. So there could be, for example,
Sorry, I should have said for bikes and pets.
Yes, for bikes and pets, yes.
Okay,
yes.
okay. That's it for now.
Thank you. All right, I think we're done with committee questions. We can move on to public comment. All right, would any member of the public joining us virtually or in person like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or approach the lectern. We'll take in-person speakers first. Each speaker will have 3 minutes, so we'll pull up the timer and start with in-person.
I don't know who's presenting today.
Say that again, sorry.
I don't know who's presenting. Are you, I have a video that I emailed to the clerk and previously to Brandon.
Not for this meeting.
I don't have access to the city clerks.
If I may, I believe the video you're talking about, many of us have seen.
Well, you've already all seen, I know, I am, but
So,
you know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
okay, well,
I'll see.
we can,
I can email it
Share
very
it.
fast if you want.
provide it, and
In fact, I could also email it while we wait for, if there's anyone online, although maybe there's not. Is anyone waiting?
Yes, there are speakers who would like to speak.
If you're online, go and I'll send you an email right now.
Okay.
Is there anyone else sorry, just to
Oh,
clarify,
sorry,
we're
yeah.
gonna do in-person first, so.
Sure. Can you have my email?
I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Fine.
I can forward it. I'll do that. I tried to give staff a heads up that this might be coming. Can we start the timer?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Lana Adamick. I'm commenting as an individual. I forwarded written comment, and this is to complement that. And I'm just going to read so that I don't garble it. What I wanted to mention here is regret that reasonable and helpful suggestions by council are now producing a delay and additional cost. So I'm in support of the revised approach, but I wish that there had been feedback sooner. Even though these suggestions will hopefully in the end result in our city being more active transportation friendly sooner, I wish there was a way to get this input from council at earlier stages so that it can shape the project where these delays would not be incurred. For example, it doesn't make sense to me that in the significant time this plan has been under development, there hasn't been a holistic network study and that there hasn't been an attempt to review the prior plans and figure out why more of them were not implemented. Instead, it is now a late-stage add-on. Mountain View is a small city, 12 square miles, some of which is inhabited only by owls. It only has so many streets, as we saw during questions, so many schools and so many neighborhoods. Our staff are very, very knowledgeable. The federal and state guidelines on serving all modes of transportation are robust and data-backed. There should be a way of figuring out how, with limited resources and within a finite amount of time, I think Vision Zero goal is 2030, I believe just 6 years from now, one can accomplish the most for the parts of our community that most need it now. I think that the modified scope will take us in this direction, or rather I hope. And for the overall comment, for any planned project, I would hope that the council and committees will be able to shape outcomes without it necessarily resulting in significant delays and cost overruns. The staff would present options at a time when it is not only take it as it is or risk it happening much later or not at all. So I was very heartened by Director Cameron's comments about things such as this coming more frequently to the CDC. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this will develop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cliff Chambers, resident of Mountain View, and let me just compliment Ms. Cameron. You've been an excellent Public Works Director. It's a very thoughtful presentation, and your professionalism is really going to be missed by the city. So good luck in retirement. I really support the vision statement. I think it really sets the right tone. And I really like the overall concept of the holistic network with the modal priorities. There hasn't been a study that I've been involved with that hasn't had more opportunity for public input. And I certainly welcome the additional input that we're going to have for the holistic network. One of the reasons I wrote you in a letter about the benefit cost analysis, which I'm really a fan of, is I went back and looked at the 2015 bicycle plan and what was implemented and what was not. And there were priorities set, and it certainly MV Access had priorities, but I really didn't feel that there was a kind of feasibility analysis. And you pointed to this earlier, that was very costly and complicated. And I think we need to have a framework for feasibility that includes economic analysis that will allow us to proceed in a timely way to things that will actually be funded and do it. And benefit cost analysis is really tricky when you get into the benefit side. You have a lot of good cost data. But the important part is for example, we were talking about bicycle boulevards where bicycles really have priority over cars. And most bicycle boulevards, cars have priority. They're relatively inexpensive, but they generate a lot of new ridership. And I actually lived on Bryant Street in Palo Alto when it was being constructed and advocated by Ellen Fletcher. We had 10 to 15 cars for every bicycle before it was built. After it was built, it totally flipped. We had 15 to 20 bicycles for every car. It really generates a great deal of opportunity for increased bicycle utilization. And that benefit really needs to be documented and really a driving force in a lot of this. how are we gonna make the kind of modal shift you were talking about earlier? So the kind of thing with slow streets, it enhances the neighborhood. Bicycle boulevards are difficult because there's a lot of not only economic feasibility, but there's the political feasibility, because bicycles have to have priorities sometimes, and cars don't have the kind of access that they used to. But it's really important to look at that whole thing holistically in order to really get projects done. So thank you for your time.
We haven't got it yet. I have to get online, that one, you already sent it?
I did.
Oh, you sent it.
I did. I sent it to all four of you.
I've gotten it. Do you got it?
You just scroll to the bottom. There's a link.
Oh, okay, sure. So I'll share this now?
For the public commentary.
Okay.
This will be part of the 3 minutes.
Yes. Probably gonna talk over it. Oh, look, I'm on camera this time. Just move the angle slightly.
I can do the timing of the 3 minutes.
Could you do the time? That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Hold on just a moment. This is good. Settles here. All right, so are you ready? Okay.
I'm David. I bike to work, and also to pick up and drop off my kids from preschool and after care. And I go through this intersection. This is Farley and Middlefield very, very often. And I got like this camera on the front of my bike. And the reason I got it was because I kept seeing people run red lights. And you can sort of barely see the light. I have a green. That was one person running a red. And then here's another. And one more running the red light at Middlefield and Farley. And that's, it's really annoying. And I was thinking that it might be good to get a red light camera, because red light cameras are allowed in California. There's a specification under California law that's pretty straightforward. Really, we just have to have a certain length of yellow light. And so that's something else in the video. I think that they could be very cost effective. They, ideally, you don't want it to collect any revenue, but I suspect that especially when it's first put in, it probably makes enough revenue that will cover there's a good chance it will cover the cost, especially if people run lights as often as they seem to here at Middlefield and Farley. So it would be nice if that could be added as some part of the transportation plan, or is the Vision Zero plan for Mountain View. Because I saw these signs all over town. I thought it'd be good to bring that by. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. I think that concludes in-person public comments. We'll move on to virtual. I will do 3 minutes. Do you want me to time them?
I can
You can do
It'll
both?
just take a couple seconds.
Okay, no problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Bruce England?
Hi, thank you. Hello, CTC members and staff members. Congratulations, Dawn, on your retirement. Yes, you've been doing a great job. So hope that you enjoy your retirement years. David's video is crazy. I mean, it's one thing for drivers to run a red light at Grant El Camino, but at that intersection, I mean, really, they can't wait. That's a crazy video. So I agree with him on the point that something is needed in places like that or throughout Mountain View. To Cliff's point, I was on Gwenda Street in Palo Alto today, and it just struck me that one thing that Palo Alto has in a lot of locations that we don't have in Mountain View are just really nice tree-lined streets. So even if you're not on a bike boulevard, it's just a nicer experience. So again, we need more tree canopy and green complete streets, and called green complete streets. I think it's, a problem to not have that word green in there, because a lot of people are going to only read so far, and some people will only read the heading. If we really want to highlight green, and we have a particular definition in Mountain View of what we want green to mean, I really would like to see that name included in there. And just hitting on some things that I hear a lot within the community related to active transportation is some things you've already talked about: the no right on red policies, protected intersections. I don't think you've talked about improved bike and pedestrian presence sensing and signal timing, but it really is pretty horrible in Mountain View. policies related to AB 43 and getting our speed limits in check where we can, better than we have right now. Promoting e-bike delivery is an option in the delivery toolkit. And, we need all kinds of bikeways. People talk about commuting on El Camino. That's great. Great to have it. California Street goes a nice long stretch. We also need the streets within Mountain View for short treks to be decent too. So I favor a mix of all kinds of bikeways and great sidewalks. Thank you.
Mary Dadio.
Good evening, and congratulations to Dawn on her retirement, and thank you for so many great years of service. I'm very excited that the vision statement emphasizes the experience of that people are going to have a low stress experience, and that our routes double as corridors of shade, encourage biodiversity, and reduce climate change impacts. This is given actually it's a significant part of the vision. It's given a lot of space, so I hope the project selection criteria reflect this, so that the eventual project designs reflect the importance that this is given in the vision. I'm a cyclist like Allison described, so I avoid busy streets. I use less busy residential streets. I think there are a lot of cautious cyclists who need such a network in order to be willing to get out on a bicycle. So these types of networks are really important. To make connected residential streets work, because our neighborhoods are pretty small, the safe intersections to connect those neighborhoods are extremely important, so that you have safe bike and ped intersections to cross, really busy, scary roads like El Camino, Grant Road, San Antonio, etc. I think incorporating bike boulevard best practices to improve the smaller streets sounds great. I hope this includes reducing the number of stop signs in the biking direction, like on Bryant in Palo Alto. I hope it's going to be a mechanism to make it easy for neighborhoods to request traffic calming measures. For example, there's been a lot of discussion recently in my neighborhood about cars speeding on Hans, which is a residential street. Someone mentioned cars going 40 miles an hour. So it seems like some traffic calming measures like speed bumps or quarter bump outs are relatively small and simple projects, hopefully. So hopefully there will be a mechanism to make it easy to request and approve small projects easily. Finally, I haven't researched traffic cameras, haven't really looked into this issue, so I don't know all the pros and cons, but I hope after seeing that video at the BPAC meeting again today, I hope red light cameras are being evaluated as a tool to at least consider the pros and cons. I frequently see red lights being run on Cuesta at Montalto, which is on a safe routes to school, and it's also a major pedestrian access to Cuesta Park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Celia Paymer.
Hi. Hello, good evening. So I did want to second the need for enforcement. I understand that state laws overrules ours, but they're not being enforced already. So not just the red light traffic cameras, but as far as I know, no one's ever been given a ticket for failing to yield at implied crosswalks in Mountain View. In fact, I've seen police cars themselves violate that. And similar to the right turn on red, they do need to stop first, and passing bikes within 3 feet. None of these things are really being enforced in our city. So sending a message that that is a priority is still important. Next, I'd like to see, in addition to the other policies listed, policies on bike and ped diversions during construction, because right now they're just generally shoved into the street and there's no real method for their how they can proceed safely when there's construction over the sidewalks. Next, I would like to see an overhaul of the sidewalks and street design standards to serve all users. Wheelchair users and strollers should not have to move single file with their family and friends to move along sidewalks. Until standards are fixed, I would actually argue for fewer sidewalks instead of more. On Sleeper, you can see where sidewalks are installed, the space for cars actually gets wider and the space for humans and trees gets removed. Next, I would like to know which plans get priority. All community input through for looking at Castro asked for bike lanes on Castro from El Camino to California. that included from BPAC and the downtown committee, and yet this committee decided not to proceed until a downtown precise plan was complete. If ATP does not have priority over precise plans, is it all a waste of the community's time to give input? You said you wanted to ask for our input, but I don't think it's worth community time if it's not going to be used and prioritized. And finally, I would actually like to see a balance of modalities. Having a super majority of traffic space for cars is not balanced. Earlier it was said we may have to take space from cars, as if that was not the balanced approach. I see it as we're reclaiming space from cars for children, humans, and the environment. Thank you for your time.
April Webster.
Hi, thank you. I'd also like to congratulate Dawn on her retirement and years of service. I hope she really enjoys having some free time. On the the vision statement, I'm really happy to see climate resiliency and biodiversity, et cetera. I'd really like to see user-centric added to that and making sure that we're people first and user-centric. People first alludes to what Celia was talking about and just this very focused priority on carving out room in our streets for people and their requirements. Also, on the user-centric, making sure we address the needs of all different types of people. And this comes into play for the bike boulevards. Most of the time, we're designing for vehicularized cyclists. And so this came up at the Caltrans Mountain View meeting where someone the type of cyclist wants to weave in and out of the bike lane and traffic. That's not the majority of cyclists. So when we're looking at things like all ages and abilities, it's not just children, but it's other types of users like women, people of color, and people of low income. I'd like to see that in there. This also plays into bike boulevards, as a few people brought up. Those tend to be more comfortable and enjoyable for some of these other types of users. During the pandemic, I have videos of this, but there were so many people using that street of all different types of user groups. I led last year for Women's International Day, I led a group about 15 plus women along the Ellen Fletcher Bicycle Boulevard, and everyone was very happy to be biking along there, and it's an enjoyable experience. I agree with Bruce on being very explicit in green complete streets. That's generally what is being done elsewhere in the Bay Area, and more generally. I think it's a slippery slope to remove it. I think we should be very explicit in that. And regarding like the definition of green complete streets, yes, in the Bay Area, it has been more on GSI, but EPA also includes canopy, and in an upcoming technical workshop that MTC and VTA is putting on, we will be defining green streets to also include canopy. And, I'm really excited to see 11 of the Mountain View staff coming to that workshop. And then finally, no right on red. I really think we should prioritize that as Palo Alto has done, and really push Caltrans to do that. I don't think we want to just use the idea that we're going to have cars backed up. Andre Ratana's life was sacrificed for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Or no more raised hands.
Okay, great. All right, so I don't think we have any more in person or virtual speakers, so we'll take the item back for committee comments and questions. And as a reminder, the recommendation is that this committee recommend that the city council approve the vision statement and a revised approach with added project scope for the active transportation plan.
Well, I liked the vision statement, and I don't.
Do you
Will
want
the
us to
vision
put it on
statement
the
go up?
screen?
Yeah.
That's
Maybe,
like that.
Lisa, do you have tweets? You have, or
Always.
always, why don't you start with your tweet and then
Yeah,
She saw us as slides.
I'm just
Okay,
gonna
great.
take the vision statement right now.
Sure.
And
Okay,
the
so we'll
other-
start, maybe we'll start with the vision statement and then we can talk about the and revise or pitch with that scope.
Yeah. So, I guess I thought the vision statement could be more succinct. And, focus more on like the end result as opposed to, well, like that it enables us to create programs and policies and things. Yes, it does, but I feel like a vision statement usually just paints a picture of the end product. And so I would shorten it. And I was thinking something along the lines of, Mountain View leads the region with an active transportation plan that defines a series of connected, low-stress and green corridors that invite active transportation. The corridors include shade, wildlife habitat, and public open spaces. And the plan enables the city to intentionally support a culture of walking and biking. I took out the section on access to housing, employment, schools, and other destinations because I think it's the entire city. And yes, those are included, but so are, yes, other destinations kind of is a catch-all, but like retail, daycare, as we heard. And it's really a citywide plan, so I didn't think that was necessary. And as I said, I don't think you need to say about the plans and policies that it supports. That was my stab at it.
It's my turn now. If you want, or I can.
Yeah,
Whatever.
You can go if you want. I don't care.
I like that we're coming forward with a vision statement. There are many elements that resonate with me. And I appreciate the tweak on the end result, because what I put in my notes is, how do we explain the plan to residents? And as you said, an end product. So what will they see in their day-to-day interaction with the city if we go forward with an active transportation plan? So I appreciate the tweaks on that. I'm open to it. And I like that that your tweaks included elements here about inviting, it shows that we're being proactive in the decisions that we're making. I don't know if you can message that to everyone.
Yeah,
else,
or you could say it again,
and then she can put it up on the
a
screen.
little slowly.
Well, I thought you could almost, okay,
Sure, time. Mountain View leads the region with an active transportation plan. Oops, I do anything.
Yep.
That defines a series of connected, low stress and green corridors that invite active transportation. The corridors include shade. I think she needs.
That invites active transportation, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah.
Corridors include shade, wildlife habitat, and public open spaces. The plan enables the city to intentionally support a culture of walking.
Okay. Let me just fix the spelling errors. Okay. So I'm just gonna take over the share.
Yeah.
So is that it? What do we see up there? So, did you have more to say? So that looks good to me. It includes everything that I thought was important, with the exception of one thing. I would like the word climate change added back in at some point,
That's good. Yeah.
wherever you think
Um,
that there. Where do you think we could add that back in? Because that's the reason for some.
maybe here.
I liked the enhanced biodiversity and reduce climate change.
Oh, say that again, that, and
Enhance biodiversity and reduce climate change.
Those were actually added to the last sentence of the vision statement, so that might be part of place.
Yeah,
And this network of streets and trails will encourage biking and walking, comma, enhance biodiversity, comma, reduce climate change.
so you wanted to,
I would add it to the last sentence
Yeah.
because we're intentionally supporting walking and biking as well as intentionally addressing climate change.
That's how it was presented. in the
Two,
vision.
is it act of to enhance biodiversity and reduce?
actually, it's about
How do you want
culture
it?
walking.
Or as, oh yeah,
I
that
think
works.
it's enhanced,
That
yeah,
works.
use of verbs, yeah, if you're alone.
Yeah, that captures everything that I wanted and is more succinct.
Well, and I think Mountain View, we're fortunate that we lead on some of the issues that were in the first sentence, right? Housing, employment, schools, and other destinations. So to me, I understand where a committee member Matishek is saying is that's part of our culture in Mountain View. And then this way it focuses on the ATP specifically. Okay, yes, okay, so we're all comfortable with the vision statement? Okay. So the second part was, recommend to the council, so first was the vision statement and then the revised approach with the added project scope for the ATP.
Could you go to the slide with the,
So I
That's
believe the revised approach had three components. It was the
Versus-
holistic network,
with the
our
orange?
the feasibility analysis, which include network level and project, and then the schedule and costs. There you go. Did committee members have any comments or feedback on this revised approach?
Well, I'll start out by saying that I like the revised approach. I like having the policy development and holistic network before the guiding principle, to develop the guiding principles and scoring from after looking at those. So I like that. I appreciate that. I'm wondering, some of the public comments brought up like cost benefit analysis, and you spoke to that a little bit.
That's sort of the feasibility analysis that we're recommending, which is gonna be expanded scope, and that'll come into play again at 2 points during the holistic network development, and then again on a more project constructability, feasibility as part of the prioritized project list as well.
And then I also found all the comments from fellow committee members and members of the public very, I don't know what to say, informative and constructive. So I imagine you're taking notes, and I hope that can be part of the input for the plan in general. I'm particularly concerned, as you can tell from my questions, about bike boulevards and neighborhood streets and shared streets as a way actually to I think they are less costly than some of the things we're doing now, although the things we're doing now, California Street, are still important. I think these allow people to shift mode and allow us to add green elements less expensively. So to me, doing more of those, which I haven't seen a lot of, is an important part of feasibility and mode shift and fulfilling the vision. So I guess that's my big overall comment at this point, unless what other members say.
I appreciate the revisions that have been made to this process. And I appreciate the comments about, we've already started working on these, so we're not losing any time. I think it will result in a great active transportation plan. I would like to have one place that residents could go to see what all of our plans are. And if there's a way to pull in the bike and ped projects from other plans into this, and maybe they're labeled, these come from the Vision Zero, so that people can go one place and see what's happening. I have my Disneyland analogies when I worked there. There were some great things about working at Disneyland and that I will always remember. And they said, never force our guests to speak our language. So when they come up and say, where are those little cars that you drive? You tell them where those little cars are that you drive. And you say, okay, but you should look for the sign that says Utopia, because that's what it was actually called. But you use their language to respond to them. And I think of that all the time, since I worked in marketing, use language that our customers would use. And I think in this case, our residents want one place to go, and they don't want to look at the funding source to figure out where they should look to find a project. So having one stop, I think would be good. So I appreciate whoever brought that up. About residents or, yeah. So let's see. I do think, some of the things that we ask for about cost benefit, feasibility, I'm totally fine with using relative measurements, low, medium, high, very high, next to impossible, something like that. We won't get to that far. Because I think it gives everybody an idea of the scale for both the amount of work as well as the cost. And I think that's what we're trying to get at. I totally understand we can't do a cost benefit on every single project. And I also appreciate the comment about every road needs to serve all modes. It's just how they serve it. But we are thinking about that as we develop the plans, which I think is a good thing. Let's see. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Great, all right. Well, I think that we're gonna need a motion, is that right, to bring it forward? Okay, so I'll just provide my comments and then if Chloe's want to make a motion. I just want to thank staff. I know that this came forward and there was hope to kind of make sure that we stick to our timeline, but bringing this to CTC, just the thought and the care with which you've made these revisions. I am really excited about this opportunity that the city has. And my questions on how we might be able to inform residents is because I know we're doing so much, and how do we communicate that? And that would be the biggest thing. And appreciate Committee Member Matichek's comments on scaling, the feasibility. I think too, if there was a bucket for, and I don't know if this would go into what we might call low, is for the things that we're already doing or are already underway. So also being able to put that into the feasibility analysis bucket. I don't even know if that would go low if we're already doing it. So I don't know how we might want to categorize that as it comes forward, but really appreciative. I think that this is gonna be something that the community is really going to come behind and excited for it to come forward in October. So we have a motion.
Do you want a motion to accept approve the revised vision statement and the revised approach with added project scope for the active transportation plan. Did you want to add anything to that?
And by revised, you mean the one that was amended?
Yes.
Revised.
Yes.
The recommended amended vision statement.
Is there anything else that we need to include based upon the statements that we made about what we appreciated or?
Not in terms of what to recommend to council, because we want to come to council in October with the vision statement and with the revised consultant agreement based upon the approach and scope
And the new cost.
and with the new cost at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll second that.
Okay, great. So motion by committee member Hicks, seconded by committee member Matishak, all in favor? All right, that is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Really appreciate it. And thanks to the public for coming. All right, we'll do a transition to item 5.2, the pavement management program update. Staff presentation will be provided by Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer of Civil Infrastructure.
While Mr. Gonzalez is setting up, I thought I'd take a couple of introductory remarks. I'm going to set up a little bit here. So one of the things that we were talking about as staff is that every year when we bring the capital improvement program forward to council for consideration, the question we can count on every year is, what is our pavement condition index? What are our planned projects to improve pavement? What would it take to improve the pavement condition index? And we also realized that a couple of years ago, we started taking our upcoming planned pavement project list to the BPAC as part of the discussion with them of where we would add on bicycle pedestrian enhancements as part of the pavement project. And that's been working out very, very well. And thought, well, why aren't we doing the same thing? And honestly, we didn't know this would take, the first time would take 2 hours. We thought that would be over an hour, hour and a half. And so we thought, this is a good time. This is some very good information about pavement condition index. The challenges that we are going to be facing and having to consider in the next 5-year CIP in terms of the different strategies we can put into place to maintain our pavement, but also looking at what we can do to enhance our street network. So this is meant to be an informational and just to start giving you some more background that we don't usually get into with council members.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Good evening, I'm Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer. I'm joined on camera, so I appreciate your time here today. So we'll begin with an update on the city's pavement management program. Borrowing a phrase from the prior presentation, our street network is intended for all modes of transportation. We built the roads and we provide streets for everyone. So we pulled this up here to try to encapsulate as many modes of transportation as we could. As Don mentioned earlier, we did say the right number before, 417 miles of streets.
Do you know it was 100? You said 140.
I did.
Yeah, I think you did right.
I think I am. And then I saw the wrong number here. It's
The wrong number.
147.
I'm sorry, I was thinking
That's okay.
county roads, that's 400. From my previous job.
That's not a problem. So 147 miles of street network, all serving modes of transportation. Making the streets safe and accessible for all is a priority for the pavement management plan. So today we'll be discussing details of how the city's pavement management program is developed and managed. We will discuss how the street network is assessed, how pavement segments are selected for treatment, funding sources, current funding sources, as well as related elements such as public safety enhancements. So some overlap from what we talked about earlier, but a lot of the nuts and bolts of how we get there. So pavement condition categories, we score pavement sections on a 0 to 100 scale, 100 being a brand new street, newly paved, and a failed pavement being below 50. VTA establishes 70 as a threshold for a good street. And they tie, so under 70, they actually tie their funding requirements to that network score. So anything under 70, cities must use their allocation of Measure B streets and roads funding for pavement work. We can't allocate any of that to transportation related, non-payment related transportation elements. So that's kind of their standard, the VTA. So it's a good guideline for us to use as we're programming our streets. So currently we have a 3-year average network PCI of 67. We use that as a snapshot of the average PCI of all the street segments in the city and to give an overall barometer of the pavement condition. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission helps the city. They assist the city in administering a third-party consultant that comes into the city every 2 to 3 years to do the technical work of assessing, and then we can focus in on what that means for the city, recommendations, economic reports come out of that assessment. So Don asked me this last week, so I should give an example of what it really means to do an assessment on the ground. So a technician actually comes into the city and they're responsible for assessing every single street segment. So if, for example, Castro might be broken up from El Camino to Evelyn. So that person needs to select what they would consider a representative area of the street. And then they physically go out there with their tools and they measure every single crack. And they measure the areas of every single alligator crack or deformation of any sort, and they score it. So every street begins with a score of 100, and each deformation the score is reduced from there. I imagine something like the dental office does the same thing. But that's essentially the plan. And it takes them a matter of months because they do every single street segment exactly like that every 2 to 3 years. So it's a really time intensive effort, but it's valuable for the city to look at that every few years. So the third party takes those raw segment scores, the overall network score, and recommends treatments for each of those sections. The report helps us shed light on how different street segments may deteriorate at different rates and how recent treatments might improve the PCI. So the report also provides economic scenarios. So it'll give you a kind of a maintain, increase by 5 PCI, or if there was no resource constraints, what would it take to actually bring all the streets up like a 100 or like a 90 condition?
It is important to remember 100 is a brand new street. So the next day, you're already almost below 100. So.
That's correct. They actually, when I went to a training a few years ago to understand how the scoring was, and the trainer specifically says that unless he sees a sheen on it, like it was just newly placed, he won't score it 100. He'll score it a 98, which I thought was a little silly. But okay, so that's the criteria, and everybody gets trained by one person, and that trainer probably goes to every single city in the state. So that is how it's established as the training standard. So this here is my favorite slide. The graph illustrates that pavement deterioration is nonlinear. So you can see that at the beginning, the early life of the pavement, you see very little deterioration. You have like a grace period of like 4 or 5 years where it's very, very nice pavement. And we can live with that for a while. And then it's followed by a steep decline. So beginning in year 5 to 7, it starts falling off. Let's see if I can move this. That's okay. So the cost of the pavement treatment is also nonlinear. So you see here that there's a couple inflection points. One arrow there says spending $1 on pavement preservation before this point eliminates or delays spending $6 to $14 on rehabilitation or reconstruction further down. So as you go down that nonlinear curve, you're also experiencing very rapid increases in cost. So with that in mind, the best approach is to actually keep the good streets in good condition. So the first element of the multiple elements of the pavement management plan. So if you look at our CIP, we have non-discretionary pavement maintenance every single year. And then on top of that, we have discretionary pavement treatments that can, based on, we always recommend them. Staff will always recommend those to move forward, but it's at the discretion of the council to do that. But the non-discretionary elements are the maintenance efforts of where you want to keep your good streets good. So those streets, the streets that have a fair or a good rating, we will apply a slurry seal to those streets to keep them in that pristine condition, protect them from the elements. Some of the things besides loading, like big trucks or garbage trucks, the other part of damaging a street is actually oxidation, sunlight, and just age. So if you put a slurry seal on that, it's protective of some of those elements. Water, if you get water intrusion in there, it can start deteriorating your roads faster. So we implement a good, keeping the good streets good first. It's kind of counterintuitive. A lot of people will come and say, apply the worst streets first and fix those, the ones that are highly deteriorated. That approach actually costs more in the long run because you end up seeing many of our good streets falling down that slope. So if we're only investing in those streets, say below 50, a lot of the good streets are going to continue to slide down that curve. So for example, investing in a fair street is actually better long-term than investing in either a brand new street or a highly deteriorated like poor street. So this is our PCI by neighborhood. The third-party report that we talked about and software allows staff to look at PCI by neighborhood. We assign each street segment the specific neighborhood it lives in. And then we do a network report or network PCI just for that neighborhood. Staff works on streets projects in 2 to 3 neighborhoods per year, and then rotates those projects through each neighborhood. So each neighborhood gets a little bit of attention every couple of years. And you can see the ones on the right are the planned paving projects that we listed. This map shows active planned projects. So I have, before I forget, pass those along. There are 2 maps on that handout. They can be found on our website. So for those people at home listening, if you go to the pavement management program on the city's website, you'll see that we have the active and planned projects color coded by year. And then on the other side, there's another map that I'll go through. But these are the planned projects over the next 3 years. And as we send our staff out to do assessments and prioritize our next projects, we update the map on the website. You're all looking for your street.
I'm looking for where there's a bunch of good ones and a bunch of bad ones.
Better. So we talked a lot in the prior presentation about transportation improvements. So this is where we kind of intersect a little bit here. So pavement striping previously was delivered as a standalone project, separate from paving. But now we're incorporating a lot of those transportation elements into our paving program. We're still exploring best practices on how to do that. But we definitely want to look for opportunities to bring those two together wherever we can. So we try to be more efficient, and we are doing more striping enhancements and refreshing through our paving projects. Funding. So we give you, every year we give you a CIP memo, and this is a lot of the similar information. So it's more of a conversation here. We can talk this through, but paving projects are funded by a variety of local, regional, state, and sometimes federal funding. State gas tax, SB1 along with VTA's license fee, vehicle license fee, and Measure B all provide funding to the city for paving maintenance. However, the contribution for these funds are not keeping up with the rising costs for paving projects. The gas tax revenue has been declining in actual value over the last several years. And we expect it to continue to decline more as more gas-powered vehicles are converted over to electric vehicles. Additionally, some of these funding sources are also intended for other types of transportation improvements. So some of the things we talked about earlier. So the net available for pavement maintenance just shrunk. We're putting more into some of the striping, the available balance for paving goes down. So you can see on the left, these are all the transportation related funds combined, and they have decreased significantly over the past 12 months. And then on the right side is the unrestricted fund, which also have those additional demands on them. So there's also federal investment in paving, and some of which MTC used to be able to just distribute to cities and counties through the One Bay Area grant program. And that used to be pass-through funding formulae. We would just get an amount of funding and we can invest it the way as appropriate. So the project selected for Santa Clara County, so in the past, OBAG would do that VTA. It was the VTA and OBAG allowed the formula funding. But recently, based on the new direction from the federal government, FHWA, the formula method no longer applies. And now these are competitive programs that emphasize sustainability and equity. So we have to go in there and we have to apply for them. We have to compete with other projects that are also, good in their own right. So the three we've mentioned multiple times to council and to BPAC and to this body, most recently, the El Monte Escuela intersection is a competitive project, but it's a protected intersection. It really doesn't cover a lot of pavement. Middlefield is a good example of a complete street that we had to compete for rather than get pass-through funding, and Moffett Boulevard. So both of those are going into design. They're going to be multiple million-dollar projects, but we had to compete for those. So we can't promise that each year we're going to be successful in competing for those types of projects. The city also invests local funding in pavement maintenance from the city's CISP unrestricted funds. So those funds are very competitive. And so we often get city facilities, capital maintenance needs, sustainability improvements like solar panels, bike and ped improvement projects, park maintenance comes out of the CIP, comes out of unrestricted funds often, and regulatory requirements. So all of these are important strategic priorities for the city, and we have to balance all of those needs with streets and sidewalks.
When we say park maintenance, we're talking major maintenance that are almost like that are more like a capital project. We're not talking just mowing the grass or anything like that. Yeah, things
fence
like that,
replacements.
where we don't have, you don't really tap into parkland fund. You have to use city funds.
Yeah, some of those amenities that wear out. So where possible, we do incorporate complete street elements. We find this most cost effective to do this as striping and pavement markings. So obviously we're working hand in hand with transportation and traffic when we develop scopes for a lot of these projects. So when we develop them, we are scoring them, we are prioritizing them based on their pavement condition, and then we're having direct communications with our counterparts in transportation and in traffic and in utilities about which projects make the most sense for us to do now and which elements would we want to incorporate on top of that. Also new, there is a new regional stormwater requirement from the regional board that also complicates our projects that take longer. So stormwater capture. The original Green Street was the stormwater capture element of it. So that is on the right-hand side over there. Those also take time and attention, and more investment
And money.
to get those.
And money.
And money, and funding, all of that stuff. And you have to find locations for it in the city, so, it's important to do. We recognize that all of these things make the project more complex. We want to do them. It also challenges us more in terms of delivering projects on a timely basis and getting these projects through this kind of design. Okay, this first bar. Okay, so this is the bar graph. This shows past investment in paving. It was in the 6 to 7 million range several years ago, and then it fell below 5 million recently. And it's rebounding back towards a kind of a stabilized spot at about 5.8 million. So this is, part of this is COVID related, not all of it, but part of it is COVID related. And the gas tax that we talked about earlier, we're simply seeing lower revenues as it goes. So it's not going to bounce back all the way to 6 to 7. It's going to stabilize somewhere below 6. And the orange line is our pavement index. So it correlates to the bar on the right side, the axis on the right side. So we are currently today at 67. And we expect, let's see, so our baseline funding levels are approximately 5.8 million per year. So we expect that the PCI will continue to slowly decline based on that investment level. To maintain PCIs, there will need to be an increase in baseline funding on the right-hand side. Says 8 million annually to maintain and 14 million annually for 5 years to increase by 5 PCI. That gets us above the 70 threshold. And we have a little bit more latitude on how we are investing our Measure B fund.
If I could just add in real quick. So again, that 8 million is about 2.2 million more than our current annual. And so one of our challenges in our next 5-year CIP is, again, where can we find opportunities to achieve this kind of investment? Because things do come up that we're not, totally, we can't always predict. For instance, whereas the federal funding used to be pass-through funding, and we could actually build it in and assume we'll have it. Now we have to compete. And if we're successful, which is what we did with Moffett and Middlefield, we competed well, that is bringing in federal money that is also going to be used for pavement work on Moffett and Middlefield. When new development comes in, if it's large enough and there's a certain amount of work that they have to do, so part of looking for these opportunities isn't just saying we need more money, it's strategizing and being able to take advantage when opportunities do present themselves, to also help take care of the paving work that needs to be done and timing it right, as Mr. Gonzalez was saying.
So I'll stop there.
Great. Do committee members have any questions? Questions, Tara, first, do you want to go?
So when it comes to the PCI for the entire city, and they look at each street, is it like a weighted PCI based upon the length of the street, or is each street counted the same, weighted the same?
Yeah, I've thought about that too. They developed the formula based on the square footage of the street, so they do take in the width. Other cities, larger cities, have much larger boulevards, so that's a way for them to, in a sense, that does weigh the streets differently. A residential street that's narrow is looked at differently than maybe a Ringsdorf or something on like the Central Expressway or something like that for a county PCI. Different.
And how long after a development is done, do we decide if they have to fix the road they dug up?
I think, we could ask, Director Rendell to talk about the conditions we put on development projects in terms of our roads, as well as when we're, again, doing utility projects, all of those things into play.
That Arango Assistant Book Worker. Can I get you to repeat the question, please? So I'm sure I'm
Yeah, so, actually, I think I'm gonna change the question a little bit. Based on what Ms. Cameron said. Yeah, I'm trying to understand, the requirements we do put on developers to, repave roads that they've dug into. And when does that actually happen? That, do we assess it after they're done with their project? Or do we anticipate at the beginning and say, oh, you're also gonna need to do X, Y, and Z?
Thank you for the clarification. It's the latter. So we go out and assess their frontage improvements, and it really is focused on the frontage. We are limited to impose conditions and requirements on them just based on their specific frontage of their development. So going outside of their frontage isn't within the scope. So we look at their frontage, we identify what improvements are needed. And we typically do, and we're also limited to the half street. So we can't ask them to go clearly to the other side of the road and repave. So those are our constraints. So we typically do half street. But if they do trenching work that they need to tie in utilities and it reaches on the other side of the street and they're doing multiple of those, we typically can require them to provide pavement improvements that kind of restore it to as what it was before or better condition. Because typically you're doing 2 or 3 utility cuts. You might have to trench across the street for joint utility, a sewer line, a water line, and then they're all generally close together, trying to avoid those multiple cuts. So we might do it just an overall patch, but we do that in advance. We get that information as part of the conditions on the project. And then when we develop the plans, we identify exactly, we do the site visit, we identify where they're planning on doing this, because we do require them to show us exactly where they're cutting, where they're tying it to. And so that's our planning effort. It's okay, now we've seen it, now we can identify this is exactly the area that you'll be restoring.
So they know upfront the areas. And then how long after they finish are they required to restore?
When you
Like
say
finish the development,
so it's
like
part,
the occupancy.
yeah, there's part of their development, is they're required to do it. And,
Okay.
and so they cannot get occupancy typically until they fulfilled all the conditions, which is restoration of street as well.
Okay.
Sometimes through working with the developer, they're doing multiple occupancies. And so we'll release some occupancies without having all the improvements done, knowing that we actually have leverage on other units before their occupancy. But we do use that as sort of our enforcement to ensure that we really need to get these restorations done prior to releasing the full occupancy, because they're motivated to get this.
Is the other. Okay, thank you.
So, what are the features that make you most competitive for the grants?
Well, now that they have made it competitive, it is, as Mr. Gonzalez mentioned, sustainability, complete street features. So, and this is one of the challenges that we have now is, in order for Middlefield and Moffett to compete well, we had to add in a lot of additional improvements as part of the project. And granted, they're good improvements, like on Moffett, we're filling in a sidewalk gap and so on. But it does mean the projects get that much more expensive. And we have to commit even more city funds because the federal funds aren't coming close to it. So that is a key difference, because the previous OBAC cycles where it was allowed to just be formula and BTA was allowed to just, they took money off the top and they spread it among the county and cities based upon population. And you could just build it into your budget and you could use it strictly for pavement work. But now we have to add in all these other improvements, and we had a slide up there where we talked about there's a point at which, as you add these in, what you're trading off is the length of pavement maintenance you can do with the same amount of money. So
How do they
You said sustainability and complete street.
Well, it's sustainability, it's equity.
Equity.
So for instance, they give extra points for, they have a mapping system where they have certain areas that they determine to be disadvantaged communities, and they have their own metrics to scoring maps and so on. And I know they changed, Rita's not here yet right now, but they used to have one map that they would use where there were no areas in Mountain View that qualified for those points because of the way it was determined. So it was all East San Jose, Gilroy. And so we automatically knew we weren't gonna get any of those points as we tried to grants. Now, they did make some adjustments, and I believe there's certain areas now in the Ringstorf area and so on that are on their map that do allow us to tap into it. So it's the location of the project, it's what the whole project scope looks like, and it has to be a lot more than paving to score well now.
Yeah, I'll add to that, that we specifically called out Middlefield and Moffett. We identified those because they were on the high injury network. They were listed in multiple transportation plans as critical areas that served, disparate communities, like lots of different parts of the city use Moffett and Middlefield. So that helped us score high as well. So when we go back and we're looking for other projects to promote, to compete, those are the projects we're looking at as those that are really high impact.
This was OBAG 3, and as a city, we did excellent. I mean, San Jose always gets the most, they have the most streets and so on, but we were on top in terms of. But that's not gonna happen every time, and many cities didn't receive a dime, and they just lost that in terms of how we went for pavement.
I would think, wouldn't the areas around looking at the right place, the mobile home parks, would they
They don't necessarily show up on the map.
The mobile.
Because
They're
they're,
I don't mean in the park, I mean like surrounding it.
so, yeah, they base it on census tracts, they are looking at income levels, and I think
Yeah,
they
that's what I
added
thought
some
they
new
would.
factors, but that one is part of a much larger census tract. And
Okay,
it
so
kinda
it averages it.
It blends it. But, yeah, we get creative on our application. Some of them we said, there is one in this neighboring city, and by doing this, we're providing a better
Oh my
connection.
gosh.
We try to go have some points.
Middlefield is a good example. It covers multiple jurisdictions,
Yeah.
so it does serve larger communities.
So are you then looking for additional revenue sources? Is that another piece
So,
of this?
one of the, last time we did the 5-year CIP, so not to scroll around, but the previous one, we did actually, as staff, receive direction from council, continue to look for opportunities to increase our commitments to our revenue sources for paving. So for us, what that's meant is for the unrestricted funds, for instance, prioritizing money going towards paving, but balancing that out with the other demands on those unrestricted funds, as well as are there opportunities with some of the other projects and funding sources to build paving into it.
Right.
So
Because then my last question is that this slide 11, I guess, where you say the most cost-effective elements to add are striping and pavement markings. Other bicycle, pedestrian, green elements can substantially increase project costs, leading to trade-offs. But it seems like those are the ones that help you score high, maybe. So it may be coming up with some way of doing match. And they also hit multiple city goals like, biodiversity and carbon sequestration and so forth. So it seems like maybe there's some sort of synergy here, like finding some matching funds so that then you get the grants.
which is what we've done.
Okay.
So we're using
Yeah,
our
is there a
unrestricted
picture
and
of
our
that, no?
transportation funds. We're matching funds to get those OB through OBAG green grants. The other thing, just for federal money to be aware of, you can only use them what's called federally aid eligible projects.
Correct.
So we're limited to arterials and collectors.
Right, they need to be on the state's, street network. So it's really just a handful of streets like Moffett and Middlefield, Ringsdorf.
Otherwise, so our neighborhood streets, that level, you can't use federal funds on. And yes, also that's where we get very strategic in how we determine what funding sources to use.
Thank you. I have a much clearer picture. Okay. And there's a way for residents to be able to see these maps online, correct?
Yes, both of those maps came off of our website.
Okay. All right. Any other committee questions on this? All right. Would any member of the public joining us virtually or in person like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom, or we have no more public comment, so I won't say that. We'll take any virtual speakers first if we have. Yes. Okay, they can have 3 minutes.
Celia Paymer.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. So one thing I do want to point out is if you look at the acreage, our city has 3 times the pavement acreage than parks outside of shoreline. So I hope we prioritize accordingly. I know that a lot of our city goals are around parks and biodiversity, and if we have 3 times the paved acreage, maybe we do want to consider how we convert them into spaces that all citizens can use, including children, safely. I do want to point out, while I appreciated at the time the goals of delaying paving projects for when we're going to cut into the streets for water or sewage, etc. I live adjacent to the Miramani project, and what I'm seeing is we're not shovel ready when that other stuff is done. So all of that other projects got finished in June, and Miramani, the paving project, still hasn't started. And the reason I'm really disappointed in that, especially, is because it's a safe route to school for our students, and we were supposed to have a 2-way cycle track for kids going to Graham. So now, not only do they not have the cycle track, but at some point, they're going to have their route to school be made very unsafe. So I would like to have in our pavement plan also consideration for safe routes to school and larger projects on those routes be done over the summer so that all students can walk and bike to school safely. Because even with there being detours, kids do not always feel comfortable attempting a new route on their own. On top of that, I was sort of shocked to see that Miramani is still shown as fair on that map. It was yellow. It currently is pure gravel. It has 4-inch deep cracks and chunks, and there's no way a slurry will repair it. So I'm not sure if that's been updated recently. Currently, there's large sections that do not have the crosswalk paintings anymore. I brought it to Ria's attention, and someone came out and put reflective flags, but because they were glued to gravel, they were gone in less than a day. So nothing's gonna stick to that road without some really significant repairs, which is another reason why if we're going to wait for all the other projects to be done, we need to be ready to go when they're done. And then another thing to consider, I heard a lot of, we can't charge developers for the impact they have on the rest of our roads. So we might want to consider some sort of developer fee structure generally, because we know those heavy trucks have an impact. For instance, all the Cal Water work on Miramani, they repaired all their cuts to the road on Miramani, but all the damage their trucks did when they stored large backhoes and large trucks on the side streets was not repaired, and it does not look like it's going to be. So all of this work does need to be accounted for, and not just pushed on to public works, as a lot of like Cal Water is at least a public utility, but for private developers, they should have to pay their fair share. Thank you.
Bruce England. Bruce England.
Sorry, this is Lotta. You've unmuted me maybe instead.
There we go. Thank you, Lotta.
Sorry.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Again, Bruce England, Wisman Station Drive, resident of Mountain View. Yeah, I just, couple of things. One is, I mean, this is all sounds, all makes sense. I've seen repaving projects in our own HOA community and familiar with how you have to track the slurry sealing and things like that over time. So it all sounds legitimate and right and no problem with that. But I still would like to hear more discussion about how bicycle lanes will be dealt with and accommodated. The place that I always bring up in Mountain View that's really awful is Dana Street between the overpass, 85 overpass and Moore Park is really miserable on the north side and the south part of Wisman Road. The roadway seems kind of okay, so that probably is the reason doesn't make it to the list. But the bikeway is horrible. It's been horrible for years. I mean, I don't know how many years I've brought this up. And so the calculation of street condition really should take into account the bikeway too. And we also have an ongoing problem of debris showing up in the bike lanes. Everything seems to float off that way because that's the way the road is crowned. And so bicyclists suffer. It sends the wrong message. If people want to be encouraged to bike ride, they need to have bikeways that don't give them the impression that they're being treated like second-class citizens. And then lastly, being forward thinking in terms of how the roads are handled. So repaving a road just as it was 10 years ago or whatever isn't necessarily where we want to be. We want to accommodate progressive ideas about stormwater management and the green complete streets we talked about with the last agenda item. All of that sort of thinking ought to be baked into how are you going to repave this street? Are you just going to take the plans from several years ago and repeat them? Or are you actually going to make improvements that will get us on the right track for the kind of things like green complete streets and improved stormwater management? When the bikeways are repaved, when that does happen, a lot of times there are these seams that are created because there are material changes, like old paving is in one part of the bike lane, new paving is another part of it, or it goes from asphalt to concrete. And then in your bike riding, you're not going to be in the full lane. You're only going to use the part of it that's decent and avoid the rest of it. So you have a narrow bikeway that's even narrower because there's only one part of it that's usable. I think the entire bike lane side to side should be usable. And if we do anything with rumble strips or anything like that, we saw a presentation recently where the rumble strip showed up partway into the bike lane. If that takes up part of the bikeway real estate too, then that's taking a narrow passageway and making it even narrower. Those are things I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lada Adamic.
Hello. I know that this presentation was mostly about gaps in funding for the payment program, so I feel a little bit bad suggesting additional ways to spend money. But I hope that you can consider cool pavement that would make, I guess, all modes, but especially walking and biking more comfortable because it wouldn't be as hot. So people could hang out on the street more. We would have less of a heat island effect. Also, I mean, I don't know that this would compensate exactly for the upfront cost, but asphalt that does not get as hot is significantly less impacted by slow, heavy trucks that tend to create those ruts that then must be repaired. So it could be that by investing in cool pavement, we would actually have longer lasting pavement as well. Thanks.
April Webster.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to just second what Leda brought up about exploring alternative types of pavement. There's a lot of research going into climate tech, and it would be great to see Mountain View exploring some of those. I'd also like to second what Bruce had to say about like tighter integration and in terms of evaluating the scores for roads to also look at the bike lanes. And I'd like to expand on that as well. to working with the folks who are responsible for making sure we meet our municipal regional stormwater permit requirements. That's MRP 3.0. I believe Don may have sort of alluded to that. The folks who are working on that are in the fire department. It's Carrie Sandel and Brian Jones. And I think getting that integration between the different departments and having that more holistic view on how we design streets is really important. Coming back to MRP 3.0, we have a target of 5 acres to convert of impervious surface like asphalt to convert to pervious. And we have to do that by June 30th, 2027. And each time the permit gets updated, they've made those requirements more strict. So I think it's really important that we start looking at Mountain View is lagging behind other cities of its same size in Santa Clara County in the Bay Area. So we are currently not really keeping par with our neighbors. And I also want to push, just in case this might be a consideration, that we don't look at offsets to meet these requirements, as opposed to actually using permeable pavement or other options, which are sometimes seen as less expensive, but they're a quicker fix and not really forward-thinking or long-term solutions. They don't help deal with stormwater management. They don't help deal with pollution or flooding like we're seeing on ECR. And so I'd really like to push council to be aware of that. And I did want to bring up one more thing. Oh, it had to do with the funding sources and OBAG. So the MTC manages OBAG, and if you're interested in equity, their equity map, they've just updated it. It's on their website. If you just Google MTC OBAG 3, it's the Bay Area Plus map. And if you want to stay on top of it, that changes and requirements for funding are communicated through MTC's Active Transportation Working Group. And I'm just going to make a plug for it. I'm going to encourage staff to attend that. Carl Anderson, who is responsible for a lot of the funding and policies and TA technical assistance programs, he talks about those programs in that regular meeting. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
There are no more raised hands.
Okay, great. I'll bring the item back now. If committee members have any comments, this is just an informational report. If we have any comments for staff.
Thank you. Some of this was brought to council and I really appreciate it. I especially appreciate this slide. Sure, investment planning slide. And I feel like I've been talking about the condition of our roads. I think I'm one of the more vocal council members about this, because they are used for all modes, almost all modes of getting around. And so it is important, I think, to maintain the condition. And we do have the challenge, though, of finding additional money. And certainly the council is trying to do that with our revenue measure to put some toward road conditions. So thank you very much. It's always good to get more information on this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna stick around.
Stay. We'll do. Maybe just 10 minutes. Yeah, take this item. I'll try to zoom in. I don't know. Oh, my ID. I'll be right back.
Okay, so on to sorry, we're on to I forgot, this is a separate item, sorry.
Wow.
I was thinking, wait a minute. Okay, so we're on to the committee staff announcement updates, requested committee reports. And we will start with 6.1, which is staff comments, and I believe this is about an update on the grade separation projects.
Yes, well, it's just gonna take a few minutes to do the update, and then I have a few additional staff comments to add.
Okay.
Okay, so are you? Okay, we set it?
Yes. I'll start. Good evening, committee members and chair. My name is Joy Houghton, Senior Civil Engineer in Public Works, and I'm here with Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer, and Don Cameron, our Public Works Director, to provide you updates on the city's two grade separation projects, Castro Street and Rangsdorf Avenue. As a refresher, staff presented information on the two grade separation projects to the council in January 2024, sharing the status, benefits, and costs on the two grade separation projects. And due to limited funding sources and a very significant shortfall for the Castro Street undercrossing, staff recommended to City Council to prioritize the Rangsdorf Avenue grade separation project. Council supported this recommendation given the following. There is an interim solution for Castro Street. Rangsdorf is more challenging to bikes and peds compared to Castro. And prioritizing Rangsdorf means that the city would focus our funding resources, including our share of the VTA Measure B funds, towards Rangsdorf, helping reduce the funding shortfall. As Rangsdorf has NEPA clearance, it's eligible for federal funding and can pursue grant funding opportunities, and the project would be more competitive with the reduced funding shortfall. What does this mean for the two projects? For Rangsdorf, it means completing final design and right-of-way acquisition, considering value engineering options to further reduce the funding shortfall, and constructing the grade separation. For Castro, it means that staff would explore completing the final design of the undercrossings and obtaining NEPA clearance to be eligible for federal funding, constructing the city utility relocation project to prepare our city utilities for the future undercrossings, and implementing interim improvements, which I'll go over shortly on the next slide, and constructing the undercrossings when funding becomes available. With an unknown timeline for the construction of the Castro undercrossing, City Council supported proceeding with the interim improvements for the Castro, Moffett Boulevard, and Central Expressway intersection. The improvements will permanently close the rail crossing to vehicles while retaining the existing grade crossing for bikes and peds, and converting Evelyn Avenue at Castro for westbound traffic only with bike accommodations. The improvements would reduce the vehicle conflicts for bikes and peds and allow elimination of the railroad signal preemption for Central Expressway, and would help reduce the bike ped wait times to cross Central Expressway. On to the new updates for Castro and next steps. Since the last updates to the CTC in June 2024, staff continues to develop the concept for the Castro Street interim improvements and negotiate a design contract with the consultant. The Castro undercrossing design activities have been suspended for reasons I will go over on the next slide, and staff will return to City Council in early 2025 with updates on the two grade separation projects. Since the council direction in 2024, staff has been exploring moving forward with the Castro undercrossing interim improvements design and NEPA clearance, and discovered that pursuing all three activities would result in the following. It would add at least 6 months to the project schedule, as we have been told by Caltrain that the undercrossing design would need to be on pause until we have NEPA clearance. Duplicated work and effort, not knowing when the undercrossing would go into construction, means that a lot of the design work and environmental studies would have to be revisited in the future. And significant additional costs to the city, as the current Castro design funding is insufficient to complete final design
and obtain NEPA clearance. In summary, to complete the final design and obtain NEPA clearance for the Castro undercrossing, we'll redirect our Measure B funds and or local funding back from Ringsdorf to Castro. Therefore, focus has been on the Castro interim improvements and also the Ringsdorf Avenue grade separation project. On to the Ringsdorf Avenue updates and next steps. Again, since the June 2024 update, the city has acquired a residential property through a voluntary sale that's needed for the project. In August, Caltrain approved the CMGC or Construction Manager General Contractor contract, and the CMGC has started attending and participating in our design meetings. This month, staff will be submitting a grant application for the FRA Rail Crossing Elimination Program. And we also anticipate receiving updated cost estimates from the CMGC as well as a third-party estimator from Caltrain based on the 35% for Ringsdorf design. And lastly, staff will provide updates to City Council in early 2025 with updates on the two grade separation projects. And this concludes my update for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other updates? Yes, so thank you very much. We continue to look at how the Council Transportation Committee is evolving and the agendas. And one of the things that we're realizing is it is helpful to be able to provide you kind of verbal updates, maybe with just slides on critical projects and things that are going on a regular basis. So what we're planning to do going forward, starting with your next meeting, is instead of just calling this under staff comments and updates, even though they're still going to be informational in nature, adding a standing agenda item, which is going to be, project updates. So we talked about every meeting giving you an update on the progress for our active transportation plan. We previously committed that we'll keep the updates on the grade separations. There might be one or two other things that come up. So we're recommending a standing agenda item, which is meant to be updates. We're requesting that we be able to just do that via slides. We have no problems with posting the slides on our website after the meeting. It's all public information. But not having to prepare formal memos, which take a lot of staff time. And this is a quick and easier way to keep people up to date if we could just focus on slides. So that's one change we would like to make going forward. And the second one is to continue what we did start 2 years ago, anticipating that there will be 4 meetings a year for this committee. And so at the next meeting, which is the last meeting of this calendar year, we'll be proposing the 4 meeting dates for next year so that we can get them on record. And of course, if it turns out that there's a change in committee membership, a date that was picked really won't work, we'll adjust it at that time. But by just presetting now what your 4 meetings are next year, we get to plan around it. We can make sure they're spaced out appropriately. So that was the rest of the staff update and our thoughts for moving forward with agendas.
Great, thank you. So in this section, we don't really have questions and public input, but if Allison, getting tired. It's just, it seems so much less formal here. Did you have any questions or comments? It all sounds good to me. All the changes. Yeah, I would also suggest the council connection that comes out every week and putting updates in that. I actually would prefer updates on projects, other things in that. Then maybe some of the information we get in there now. Because then we can pass along, residents ask us about things. Instead of asking you, we just look in the most recent council connection.
Paying attention?
Yeah, I
will tell you every once in a while, I'm like pushing it out saying, come on, I need stuff for council connection. There's plenty of stuff to let council know.
Writing it down.
There's a lot going on.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so I think, having updates, standing agenda item would be great. And I don't mind just slides. It's great. Yeah, I appreciated hearing this. Thank you. And the committee membership will change next year. Yes. Yes. But you'll be in the pub. Right, right. Right there on my calendar. Okay, so, there's nothing else on that one. Oh, we are gonna take public comment. Sorry, I turned the page.
Yeah, I understand that anything that's on the agenda is, but usually we do committee comments first. And then we do public comments on the
Yeah.
entire item 6.
Okay, are there any members of the part? Their hands raised? It's, let's see, I don't think you had any comments, right, Ed? There's no, I was watching, I was like. Okay, so we'll close the public comment and we'll turn it back to the chair. To say we're adjourned.
Perfect. We'll move on to item 7, adjournment. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next Council Transportation Committee meeting will be on October 29th, 2024, and our meeting is adjourned at 9:36 p.m.